Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
So, Jacob, can I congratulate you? The surgeon was being mocked by Nurse Maria. Your long-awaited vacation has finally arrived. At least I'll get a break from you. But don't make a despot out of me, the doctor said angrily. As if you do not work well with me, I can even say you want you and cherished. And you waved Jacob. That's for prevention. The surgical nurse laughed. Or you'll like it so much on vacation that you won't want to go back to work. And then what are you going to do? You're going to start hounding me. Yeah, you'll be chased. You won't go for a word in your pocket. Jacob said with annoyance in his voice. You only have to say one word, and you say 10 in return. That's why you're lucky to have me. Maria did not stop. I'm the one who yells at others. But for you, I'll tear anyone apart like an asshole. That's how the surgeon got up from the table. We will celebrate my vacation today. He looked questioningly at the nurse. Or like last time, we're going to clink tea. Or I don't want anything strong. The woman grimaced. I have to work tomorrow. You're the one who'll be sunbathing on the beach, Maria. Frankly speaking, I don't want to go anywhere. Sadly, replied the surgeon. I would be at home in bed for these 5 days. If I don't have to, I wouldn't go anywhere. And as for drinking, let's just have a beer. I don't want wine either. I don't want to be on an airplane with a sore head. Let's do it, nurse. I'll just run to the store and get some Baltica. And after the surgery, you and I will have about an hour off before the end of the shift. We'll celebrate your vacation with you. Maria quickly packed up and went out to the store. Jacob took care of his paperwork and completely immersed in routine work. What's your vacation? Did he raise his bottle of beer? 4. Nurse at the end of the shift. May your vacation be amazing. I wish you take your mind off everything and enjoy life a little. Anyway, Jacob, here's to you. And here's wishing you don't miss me. He raised his bottle. 2 dark glasses clinked against each other, and the man and the woman closed their eyes, either from pleasure or from fatigue. Jacob was a hereditary doctor. His parents and their ancestors had been very careful to protect the legacy of their lineage, which originated from a single surgeon who had come to work. Jacob's great-great-grandfather was one of the best surgeons of the time. But the difficult political environment led to the fact that even the doctor's grandfather traveled frequently. But despite the difficult times, the family managed to maintain its continuity, which made it possible to continue not only family traditions, but also to educate professional doctors. From the very childhood, Jacob knew that he would be a surgeon, and it was not because his father, Ethan, who was a surgeon himself, insisted on it. It was as if the boy was born for this very purpose. He had never had a fear of blood, which is usually seen in children dogs with their paws tied up, cats with poisoning, and many other critters. This was for little Ethan, his real world, and he simply adored it. At school, the teenager now and then stopped the blood of his favorite classmates, or in the manifestation of sprains, when someone unluckily fell from a tree. Despite such a strange hobby, Ethan had many friends, and it sometimes embarrassed his parents. The latter always considered themselves true intellectuals, but their son was always socializing with the simplest people. Very often they had lunch and dinner with children from disadvantaged families. But when the guy entered medical school, everything in his life immediately changed. Time was barely enough for a little snack and sleep. So a lot of friends just drifted away. The only friend who still socialized with Ethan to this day was Max. He sat at the same desk with him for years in high school. Max went to Boston. Yes, he stayed there to work after graduation. He was an electronics engineer. Max would visit his parents in Chicago from time to time, and they would meet Ethan. The boy's parents thought that eventually their friendship would end. But to everyone's surprise, over the years it only became stronger. Therefore, each of them was aware of all the things that happened to each other. Jacob, despite his profession, was a sentimental and gentle person. He was very fond of poetry. He and his nurse Maria even had one interesting tradition. Before every operation, Jacob would recite a poem. Jacob was 32, and he was married to the beautiful Adriana. He had to spend a lot of effort to win her. The girl was completely unapproachable for the first few years. James was a longtime family friend and had 2 daughters. The first girl was from the first marriage, and in her there was nothing remarkable. But Adriana grew up to be more than just a beauty. She looked like a real model. Jacob was 4 years older than her. They hadn't seen much of Adriana growing up. Her father was a very rich man, so his daughters were rarely at home. But when Jacob met the girl on her birthday, he could not take his eyes off her. James decided to celebrate such an event at home. A lot of guests were invited. Among them was Ethan's family. Jacob was almost 24 at the time. He had 1 year of college and 2 years of graduate school left. Adriana had just returned from Europe. And the girl didn't want to stay at home. There were rumors that she had a boyfriend, but no one really knew about it. So Jacob wrote it off as gossip. The boy hadn't seen Adriana for a long time. Sometimes her older sister came to visit, but the girl herself had last seen Ethan about 5 years ago. "Oh my God," he exclaimed. "How beautiful is she!" Adriana is a goddess. Jacob kept his eyes on her the whole birthday. It was obvious that she didn't care about him at all. She was always talking to someone and laughing loudly. "Hello, Adriana." He came up to her. "Jacob, happy birthday. I wish you always remain as beautiful as a goddess." The girl looked at him with interest. She could not realize at first who it was. "Jacob, is it you?" She finally recognized the guy. "I'm sorry, I couldn't recognize you at first. You've changed a lot." You laughed too, Jacob. "How are you doing?" "What are you doing?" Thanks. I'm doing fine," the girl replied calmly. "My dad dragged me back, and I'm so used to USA. Did we have such a bad joke of a guy? What's there that isn't here?" "Everything," Adriana laughed. "After talking to Adriana, I began to think about her all the time. She stayed in the USA until the end of the summer, so we often visited them, went for walks with the girl." "What if you fell in love with a Russian guy?" he asked her once. "So what? What would I do with him?" She replied unhappily. "I would die of boredom with him. I need a real man, brave, courageous. I need him to be macho. You know what I mean? Not really." Jacob scratched his head. "How do you explain it?" "I like temperamental guys to get me," answered the girl. "I don't like it when guys get emotional. I like it when they risk something for me. Then I see my value. And the more risk I take, the more likely I am to fall in love with a guy like that. Isn't just saying I love you enough?" "I didn't understand, Jacob. You could write poems for the one you love. What's the point?" Adriana laughed. "Need action drive." That time Jacob did not understand what Adriana wanted from life, but that didn't make her any less attractive to him. He fell more and more in love with her. They spent a lot of time together. But the girl didn't seem to notice him. She kept talking about what kind of guy she would like. Maybe in this way Adriana was teasing Jacob. But the fact that she didn't like him and wasn't interested in him was obvious. The time was nearing the end of August. Jacob couldn't stand it and invited Adriana to take a walk around Chicago. They were walking, talking about nothing. The guy suddenly stopped Adriana. "I love you." Lowering his head, Jacob said, "Marry me." "Jacob, you what?" The girl laughed. "I don't want to offend you, but you're not my type at all." "What tastes can be when it comes to love," he said in amazement. "Sorry, but I can never love you." Adriana replied with a smile. "Try to understand me." But Jacob, no matter how hard he tried, did not understand her. The girl flew to Europe again, leaving him with a broken heart. The guy hoped that in time he would forget her, but the passion for her only flared up. The next summer she flew back to her parents again. Jacob followed her around. "Jacob, what are you like a little child?" laughed at him girl. "I love you so much that I don't want to live. I told you many times you are not my type." That night, Jacob got drunk for the first time in his life. He was so hurt and unbearable that he drank too much. He remembered that he had gone, so to speak, to a showdown. But beyond that, his memory was a complete blank. The next day, he woke up in his house and remembered nothing. As Adriana told him afterwards, he didn't get to see her that day, but it was a good lesson for Ethan. The guy hadn't been drinking before. But after this incident, he didn't drink anything else except champagne and beer. And so ended the summer, and another year passed. Jacob had already told his parents that he was passionately in love with Adriana and that he could not imagine his life without her. "Jacob, I will talk to Sergei Nikolaevich," said Ethan. "Maybe he can influence his daughter. Because after the incident with Mom, he's going crazy." "What happened at Emily's?" the son asked in surprise. "She was seeing some guy secretly from her parents," sighed the father. "Her parents wouldn't let her marry him. So she got pregnant by him and had a baby. Now they've sent Emily to Europe. She's in Italy with the baby in their villa. Her parents are trying to marry her off to anyone to wash away the shame. So now the court may not even look at Adriana's wishes. They won't survive a second disgrace." "Wow," Jacob said in shock. "So Emily went against her parents. That's not like her at all." "Adriana is." "Yeah, that's right." "Maybe that hurts James more," Ethan said with annoyance. "She's always been a girl, calm and easygoing. But once she fell in love, she went against her father." "And who's the boy?" "Curious?" Jacob asked. "Did she introduce him to her parents?" "No," replied the father. "She only told her father that she had found her man, that he was a regular guy." Naturally, James didn't agree to that. "I understand him in some ways, though," the boy sighed. "I'm so in love with Adriana that I can't live without her. Maybe the same thing happened to her. Anyway, I'll talk to him," the man said calmly. "You see, Jacob, I think he would have agreed right away if it weren't for one thing." "You mean the money?" The son sighed. "They're very rich people. Being friends is one thing, but marrying your daughter to me is another." "Yes," Ethan said sadly. "His status might not allow it." And so it was. James had turned him down. He knew Jacob was a good guy, but he wanted a more promising husband for his daughter. So another year passed, and Jacob gave up altogether. The guy was finishing his residency and decided that he would never get married in his life. But suddenly circumstances changed dramatically. It was the end of May when James called his father and arranged to meet in person. "Ethan, I know you may not have understood me last time," he began. "I in no way meant to offend you or your son. But my status in society requires strict adherence to certain rules that I cannot break. In Europe, Adriana dated a guy for several years. He is the son of an immigrant from the USA who managed to get rich there. People they are not just rich, but in their circles famous. Sorry, I didn't tell you anything about that. Anyway, Adriana and this guy had a wedding scheduled for early May. Turns out he had another girlfriend. The guy's parents had cleared it with us. They really wanted Adriana to be their daughter-in-law. We even planned to pool our capital, but a week before the wedding Adriana, or even the girl, found out and gave Mike a scandal. She also told his parents everything. Anyway, it all ended with him editing some obscure video and audio recordings. He slandered Adriana in front of everyone at the wedding and accused her of cheating. We left Europe in such disgrace that we still don't know what to do. If Jacob still loves Adriana, then we are ready to perform your wedding." Ethan looked at his friend in utter bewilderment. On the one hand, the man realized that this was not about friendship or love, but about profit for James. There was already whispering about him and his daughter in the USA, and it was hurting his reputation. On the other hand, Jacob still loved Adriana. The man was in a very difficult position. "James, I'm sorry, but I can't decide for myself." Finally, he said, "I need to consult with my son." "Yes, I understand." "I'll wait," James replied. "I'm just asking you to think it over." Adriana agreed to marry James, and just like that, fate took an unexpected turn. And Adriana married a surgeon from a poor but intelligent family. "I'll try to love you," Adriana said after the wedding. Then Jacob was ready to wait for her all his life, but time passed, and their relationship remained half friendly, half official. But Jacob still continued to believe that one day Adriana would be his not only body, but would love him with all her soul. The man hoped that things would change after the baby was born. He and his wife had been actively planning for a child for several years now, but so far everything had been unsuccessful. That's why Adriana suggested that during his vacation to change the environment and go to the sea to rest. Jacob was so tired at work. He would not have had the strength to fly further than Turkey. Adriana, of course, wanted to vacation on more prestigious beaches. But in the end, she and her husband agreed. "Jacob, with your job, we cannot go anywhere at all," complained in the evening wife. "Well, maybe that's enough. Why do you need this city hospital? Dad promised us a long time ago that if you open your own clinic, he'll help us." Adriana: "Well, what am I going to do in this private clinic?" Jacob was angry. "I can't just sit around signing papers without surgery. No matter how hard it is, I love my job. I save people. I don't want to. There's no point in cutting off someone's cellulite or plumping up their lips with your experience and expertise. Would you be able to get rich like that already?" Adriana was indignant. "Good plastic surgeons make a lot of money." "Adriana, is there something you're missing?" Her husband looked at her sternly. "Do you need anything?" "It's not that." She answered quickly. "There's a difference between a doctor from a city hospital and a famous plastic surgeon. And my goal is to save people, not to disfigure them under obscure standards of beauty." Jacob said coldly, "When will all this be banned? How much do these plastic doctors produce ugliness? Is what they do beautiful? It's just a tribute to fashion. It's like when they used to spoil teeth to make them ink, as on losing cheeks, hit with forces containing mercury. The point remains the same. People have to learn how to age naturally. Jesus, how old-fashioned are you?" Adriana whispers, "You don't know anything about fashion or beauty. Imagine I had a baby and gained weight. And where do you think I should put all this fat? How many women suffer from such problems? You're the man who set these beauty standards. You wouldn't even look at me fat. You're right, but only partially side the man. Up to 30 years really looking for some ideal perfect form. But now I do not care what size clothes you wear. And imagine if I got really fat, what then? But I'd hate it if you were fat," she answered honestly. "You see, you are not at all interested in my content." With annoyance in his voice, said Jacob. "So it turns out that your attitude to me determines only the form. And what kind of person am I? This is for you a complete nonsense." Unfortunately, this topic was not finished that day, and I watched a lot of people on the beach. I mean, why did this woman come here to show off her body? Isn't it humiliating for her husband? The man watched carefully as one woman about 35 years old walked her body out. She was wearing an attractive swimsuit and was trying her best to prove to other people that she had a special figure. The stranger furtively caught the gazes of other men and enjoyed it. But here her husband was also standing nearby, preying on the younger ones with his eyes and breaking them with his gaze. What is this? Jacob was indignant to himself. Is that a family? Is there any love there? Each of them would cheat on the other if they could. He looked unhappily at Ada, who was posing in all her glory near the water. She was going in and out of the sea. Of course, Jacob knew somewhere inside that Adriana didn't love him, but he still hoped that one day she would want to look inside him and see what he was really like. The man shifted his gaze and an elderly couple came into his field of vision. The man and woman were in their early 70s, but they were holding hands like teenagers. The stranger had a rounder belly, but it was obvious that his companion was skinny, and the old woman was not embarrassed in the slightest. They kept looking into each other's eyes and smiled merrily. How pleasant to look at them, Jacob rejoiced. Nothing changed their love. No age, no decrepit bodies, no passionate glances around. How I wish Adriana could love me the same way. After a few days, Jacob finally calmed down and was able to enjoy life. The last 2 days had gone so well that the man even regretted the fact that they had to leave tomorrow. "Hello, Max," dialed Jacob. Friend's number when they got home. "I'm on vacation, so I can at least talk to you normally." "I'm so glad to hear from you." I heard a happy voice. "Listen, I'm gonna be at my parents' house in 2 days. Why don't we get together? I'm only going to be here for a couple of days, but I can't not meet you because I miss you so much." Jacob was looking forward to meeting his old friend. Finally, it was Thursday. "Max, hey, buddy." He hugged the man. "How many years? How many winters?" "Hey, buddy." Max hugged him. "We haven't seen each other for almost a year, so tell me how you're doing." They liked to meet at their old cafe. This time they still had the same tradition. What business could there be? Jacob answered calmly. I have all the same things going on. It's the same scene, only sometimes the scenery changes. Do you have at least some variety? You have different operations, a friend said. And we have been sitting on our project for 3 years. We still cannot move. I am already sick of it, and I understand you, answered Jacob. It reminds me of the last years of studying at the Institute, knowing for sure that it will all end soon, but it all drags on and on without end. Sighed Max. I regret so much that I turned down an internship abroad then. You know Peter, who went to France instead of me and stayed. Sometimes he calls me and tells me they have such interesting things going on over there. There's a project in Africa or in Israel. He's almost seen the whole world. And I was afraid. How could I abandon my project in New York? So I was left with nothing. Max, no one knows what's best for you. His friend looked at him seriously. Maybe you wouldn't have succeeded in France. Or maybe it just wasn't your time to finish your project. Maybe something better will come up for you. Well, you're right about that, my friend smiled. If I'd gone to France, then this miracle wouldn't have happened. Betty is expecting a baby. Wow, the friend rejoiced. My God, how many years have you tried? How many protocols have you gone through? It's a miracle. I'm sorry, but I never said Max's head down before. We're 8 months pregnant with twins, boys. Tenta, let's grab a beer and toast to that, Jacob suggested. I'm so happy for you. What about you and Adriana? Max asked. You've already started planning. You know, we don't have any problems, neither she nor I, the man replied. She said herself that she would not have a baby until she was 27, and now she is 28. We started to try 2 years ago, but not persistently so that we could work on it for a year. We went to Turkey especially for this purpose, to change the situation. I am sure that you will succeed. Max supported him. Betty and I have been working hard for 10 years. We have spent so much effort and money, but it is worth it. You know, when I see our boys kicking their feet in the stomach, it makes my heart sink. Jacob, can you believe I'm a father? The news that Max and Betty were about to have twins inspired Jacob so much that he decided to talk to Adriana and ask her to take the matter more seriously. But there was 1 day left before the vacation was over. Jacob didn't want to do anything that day. He just lay on the couch and watched TV. Adriana had gone somewhere in the morning, so he just enjoyed his solitude. The man didn't want to think about anything. He was completely immersed in some nature program he was watching. He was so absorbed in the TV that he didn't notice his wife returning. Adriana was standing in front of the couch and was very nervous. Jacob, she called out to him, Jacob, I need to tell you something. The man looked at his wife's concerned face and turned off the television. What happened? He asked excitedly. Are you all pale? Jacob, I went to the doctor today. She started we're going to have a baby. You're pregnant? He said, Adriana in astonishment. We're having a baby. Oh my God, that's news. Jacob clutched his head. A real surprise. The next day, Jacob went to work. The fact that Adriana is expecting a baby so inspired him that the man just flew with happiness. Maria, is this for you? He handed his nurse a box of Turkish sweets. Can you get fat? I'll let you. Jacob, if I were 10 years younger, I'd never miss a guy like you. The nurse laughed. Thank you, darling, but be careful. The surgeon frowned playfully. You do not tell me such things. After all, I'm not only married now, but I'm going to be a father. Are you pregnant? In astonishment, said Maria. Wow, and congratulations from the bottom of my heart. Everything in Jacob, as if from the news, changed. He began to devote more time to his wife. Of course, it was impossible for him to spend a lot of time with her, but after work he tried to be with her every day. Not to say that Adriana was happy about it. The woman would have preferred to be alone more. Are you the one with the mood swings? Her husband told her. A very typical pregnancy condition. So be patient. If you feel like crying. But it's all business and in moderation. Don't get yourself worked up. I can imagine what will happen to me when Adriana starts sobbing like that. I'll have no one to care about then. It's not that bad, replied her husband. And not every pregnant woman has strong mood swings. Many just have morning sickness, and that's it. So let's not create problems for ourselves in advance. It's easy for you to say you're unhappy, said the wife. It's not like you're pregnant. You will not believe it, but I would with you to change places. Agreed, laughed the man. And Idle would lie around all day and from his work would rest. But unfortunately, only women give birth. All the grandparents were also very happy and were waiting impatiently for Adriana's belly to appear. The girl was very much annoyed by this, and lately she tried to stay at home and not go to her or Ethan's parents to visit. But that didn't stop them. So their parents themselves often traveled to their house to visit them. Jacob, I'm so sick of all these parties. One night my wife burst into tears. I just want to lie here and they're asking me what I ate today. How am I doing? Hell, I'll talk to your mom so they don't bother you so much. Jacob suggested it. You tell your mom that too, and say no hard feelings. But I don't want to see anyone right now. You're right. I'll call them, the girl replied. If I need to, I'll go to them myself, or I'll just get in the car to go somewhere and be alone. They're already here on the doorstep. So a month went by. Adriana never really started to get a strong COSA. Mostly her eating habits changed. She had a constant craving for hot pepper chips and snacks. At first, Jacob was in complete shock when she ate several packs a day of both. But after he consulted a good doctor, he calmed down. The main thing is that she's not throwing up or vomiting a lot, he said. Jacob, and this after the third, fourth month will pass, so let her eat. Despite the fact that the mood changed with supernatural speed, Jacob eventually got used to it. At times, the girl was simply unbearable. She often left home on the pretext that she needed to be alone. But none of this could not overshadow the joy of Ethan, and he was more and more tuned in to become a father. Max called a friend one day. How does it feel to be a father? To twins. You know, Jacob, I cannot tell you all this in one word, a friend said tiredly. It's not that there are pros and cons to everything. Just at first such euphoria, and then, when they do not sleep at night, and you, which at night already does not sleep, it is difficult to say. Of course you love your kids anyway. But I'll tell you honestly, for me the biggest problem is not that they scream, but that you can't even calm them down at night. I don't know how Betty handles them all by herself. I'm still in the euphoric stage, he sighed. Although Adriana has a terrible temper, and she's always getting on my nerves. But I'm very happy about her pregnancy. So you take advantage of the moment to be happy, laughed Max. And then when the baby is born, you won't know where you can get away from it. I'll tell you this, friend. If you feel that you have become a father, then everything else is like the sea. Well, if by the birth of the child you do not realize it, then it will be difficult to get along with it all. My Tanya had no problems during her pregnancy, and she was only on the ward once. Not as much stress. We got away with it all. But the kids were born so restless for some reason, and nobody knows why. Jacob was mentally prepared to be a father. He'd been setting himself up for it all along. Instead of nature and travel shows, he studied different seminars for future fathers, read medical books on family psychology. In general, he had no intention of backing down and was preparing for his new role with all the responsibility he could muster. A nurse asked him one day, "He's getting serious. No jokes? You don't tell funny stories, Maria, but I have to grow up sometime. Teacher's morals," he replied. "I'm preparing for fatherhood." So what? You don't think you can laugh now? The nurse laughed. You're like a big baby, for God's sake. Sometimes I can, he argued. But how can I be an example to my child if I continue to be so unserious? You'd better laugh, the nurse smiled. Otherwise your child will think from birth that it is not allowed to have fun and will grow up with some abnormalities. Do you think you're in shock? The doctor said. I didn't think about it. It feels like you're pregnant, not your wife. Maria laughed. You should have gotten yourself so worked up. You know, when I had my mumps, I had a real crush on my husband's jokes. He's a joker. As soon as he'd say something funny to me to distract me and make me laugh, I'd start crying. At first he couldn't understand what was wrong, and I couldn't explain it to him. On the contrary, he wants to cheer me up, but his jokes make me cry. Thank God, by the 5th month, my tantrums were over. Jack was born a healthy boy. He's 18 now and as humorous as his father. When they get together to laugh with them, you can sew, "Let's not have your morning face. I can't wait for Adriana to have the baby, and I'll run away from you before you do." "Yeah, who's going to let you go?" Jacob smiled. "I can't do without you here. So don't even think that you and I will be carried out of here." He laughed. "That's the same thing." Maria supported him. "Now it's different. And I thought that I already began to lose my Jasoba." From that day, Jacob began to treat his wife's pregnancy as easier, and it became easier for him. About 3 weeks later, the head doctor called them all together. It was a big meeting. There were a lot of questions. We had to solve something with the new equipment. It was scheduled to arrive next week. The Ministry of Health had come up with some new innovations. We had to put them into circulation. All in all, it was a tough day. There were no scheduled surgeries until this afternoon. And no emergencies yet. Jacob and his colleague David were discussing something in his office. Maria made them tea, so they'll send someone from the department to get the new equipment up and running. The nurse asked with interest, "Or do we have to guess how it works?" "That's the thing," David sighed. "They were supposed to send Ethan and me for training, but because of the lack of money, we're going to have to figure it out on our own. It's like kindergarten, for God's sake." Jacob scolded, as if we were playing in a sandbox. "And what if this machine during the operation will stop or somewhere their switches? And we don't know about it." "They don't have any brains in there, or they don't care," answered his colleague. "They are all theorists there. Do you think in this Ministry of Health anyone like you and me stood at the operating table for so many hours? So you cannot even count on their understanding. All right, but it's not far from malpractice." The doctor couldn't calm down. "I've got a baby on the way, and I can't even deal with this gang." "Well, we'll deal with it ourselves." David said tiredly, "You heard what the chief said. They'll send us detailed instructions along with the equipment." He swore like hell. "We've been waiting so many years for a new machine. And now, when it arrives, we won't know what to do with it. Actually, it should be brought by an engineer and some doctor who is already using it." A nurse intervened. "You know, Maria, they don't owe us anything," sighed the elderly surgeon. "Their duty is to demand from us and meet the deadlines they set. It's the same thing every time. Once a surgeon becomes chief of surgery, after a couple of months, he forgets what kind of workload is there. How hard it is for us to meet all their deadlines. He's been suffering from it himself and wanted to leave. Instead of the previous one, now he's becoming a tyrant himself." David was finishing his tea when Ethan's phone rang. A text came in. The man reached into his pocket and opened some kind of video. After a few minutes, he turned pale. A video and 3 pictures came to his phone with his wife in them. Jacob ran out of the office. "No, it can't be." "Pale lips," he said. "This is some kind of setup." The man was no professional, but he thought both the photos and the video were believable. As the photos showed Adriana with some man having intimacy at their villa. Jacob could not understand how he should react to all this. Was it all true, or had it all been set up for some purpose? He was in complete prostration for a few minutes, but then it came to him from the deepest depths that he urgently needed to go to the cottage. David, out of breath, ran into the office. "I'm asking you to cover for me. I need to leave urgently. I'm in trouble. Did something happen to Adriana?" The doctor said excitedly. "She fell." That's all Jacob could manage to say. "I'll work for you later. Maria, stay with David." The nurse and the doctor gave the man a concerned look. He was very nervous and not himself. "If I go in a straight line now, it will take me about 40 minutes, Jacob told himself. Shouldn't I call her first? Maybe someone had set this up on purpose. He stopped. He was torn in different directions. On the one hand, he wanted to call. On the other hand, he wanted to check it out. Well, let's say it's all a lie. Jacob started the car. Then I'll go to the cottage and find no one. Then I'll start to find out what it was. But if Jacob's heart seemed to go through that thought, the man's heart began to pound frantically. But if it's true, and she is there, I'll catch her in the act, he whispered, wiping lines of cold sweat from his face. All the way he was trying to find out if she was cheating on him with someone else or not. His brain was just exploding at the thought. But other than this video and pictures, he had no proof, which meant it could all be a lie. Jacob. He had performed many difficult surgeries in his life. But what happened to him then was his greatest challenge. He had never experienced such fear. The man decided to leave his car at the beginning of the street so that no one would recognize him. He had to walk another 500 meters. He walked cautiously, looking around. He felt like he was a criminal. God, when am I going to get there? Nervous, he said to himself. This all seems like bullshit. He turned onto his street and was simply stunned. His wife's car was parked outside their house. Jacob stood like a stumbling block and could not move further feet softer. He almost fell. The man sat down on some bench outside the house he was standing next to. He felt like his heart was going to jump out. I must find out the truth, he said to himself, and slowly got up from the bench and walked towards the cottage. Jacob cautiously crept up to the fence. The gate was locked. The windows on the first floor were for what arena, and nothing could be seen. The man strode around the back. The neighboring villa was long abandoned. He crept slowly up from the garden side. One foot caught, and he could barely keep his balance. Finally, Jacob was outside the house. He slowly turned the handle of the small door that led from the small shed into the house. Taking off his shoes on his socks, he walked down the hallway. The door to the living room on the first floor was open. Jacob pressed himself against the wall and crawled sideways along it. The closer he got, the clearer some sounds became. Finally, he began to recognize voices. Adriana, well, will you stop playing games? The man said grudgingly. We've been hiding from everyone for so many years. It's been almost a year since I got divorced. Sweetheart. But now, until I give birth to a child, I cannot tell her anything or her. The man heard his wife's voice. You think I'm not tired of all this? If it hadn't been for my father, I wouldn't have married him at all. But after Europe, he didn't want to wait, you see. It all hit him hard, and he had to rebuild his reputation. So I went into marriage with Ethan. Do you know how much I regret it? Well, what are you going to tell him now? The stranger sighed. I mean, you're pregnant. I don't know, Kevin. Adriana answered. That's why I'm asking you to wait. Maybe in time something will change. I love you, the man replied. I can't live without you anymore. Neither can I. She kissed him. Be patient for a while. I'll think of something. Jacob at first wanted to fly into the room and tear it all down, but then he changed his mind. He left the house as carefully as he came in. He climbed over the back of the neighboring cottage and blinked stealthily to the beginning of the street. At that moment, Jacob did not want to think about anything. He only wanted to scream at the top of his voice. The pain stiffened his heart as well, so that it became difficult for him to breathe. What kind of a fool was I? He finally burst into tears, getting into his car. After all, she never loved me. I had made it all up, but why? Does it make me feel better that she lied to me all those years? On the contrary, I'm in unbearable pain right now. Jacob drove and drove. He didn't know which direction to go. He just wanted to drive into some foggy place, disappear forever. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening when the man began to regain consciousness. He was very thirsty. His stomach was sticking out a lot. He stopped the car and got out to stretch his legs. Looked at the navigator. Jacob had driven almost 200 kilometers. Oh God, where am I? He looked around. I don't even know these places. After hitting the waters a bit, the man sat down in his seat. The door to the car was open. The evening brought a bit of a chill. So it's all true, and I can't deny it, he said loudly. I wondered what I should do with this truth. Jacob clutched his head and sat like that for a while. But no matter how hard it was for him, he had to make a decision. Now the question arises, whose child is it, mine or his? The man thought, what am I supposed to do with all this? I can't live with myself after this, that's for sure. No matter how much I love her. It just doesn't make any sense, because she doesn't love me, to tell me everything that happened today and right now or to wait for the right moment. It's not like I can play it off like nothing happened. The man stepped out and wandered toward the field. The evening grass filled his lungs with freshness and coolness. For a while, Jacob even forgot where he was and what had happened to him. but he brought it back quickly. I need to wait for a while. Jacob decided. Maybe I can find out whose baby it is. Then all these issues will be easier to deal with. If it's Kevin's, then the divorce will be painless. But if it's my child, then her parents will get on my nerves, maybe even threaten me. So I need to buy some time to learn about everything and have arguments on my hands. Then her father will have nothing to say to me. I'll keep the video and the photos. And then the man turned pale. Until that moment, the thought of who it could be had never even crossed his mind. But then who knows that Adriana has a lover? Shocked, he said, "Who sent me all those pictures?" Jacob quickly ran to the car, picked up his phone, dialed the number from which the video and photos had come, but it was blocked. Naturally, no one would send such photos to the police from his personal number. The man said with annoyance in his voice, "But if you think about it, who could it be? Probably one of my employees." Yeah, no one at my workplace has ever seen Adriana. Only Maria, and that's on a photo taken on a cell phone. And no one knows about our cottage. Well, they know we have one, but I've never told anyone the exact address. With work, I guess it's all a dead end. Nobody here cares much about me. Then maybe it's just one person taking revenge. Maybe Kevin's not her first man. Then it's very likely that he's been following her and knows where our villa is and when she and her lover go there. I don't have any other options yet. It looks like Adriana's revenge, and I'm the bargaining chip in this whole thing. But maybe it's for the best. It's not a question of how many men she had while we were married. It's the fact that she didn't love me, and if I continue to pursue this line now, that man in the photo will not rest. He's gonna look at my reaction now, and then he's gonna send me more proof, because he's going to have to prove to me that Adriana really cheated on me. Yeah, the best thing for me to do in this situation is to wait. Despite the fact that Jacob regained some composure, the man was in a lot of pain. He was well aware that after what he had seen, he would no longer be able to hide his anger. Jacob made up a story that he had some serious problems at work, so he did not want to see anyone anytime soon. The man was on his way home. It was getting late when his phone rang. "Jacob, where are you? Did you hear Adriana's voice? It's 10 o'clock. Yes, we had a serious problem at work. It's cold," he answered. "I'll be there in about an hour." "Hell, I'm sorry, but I don't want to see anyone right now," he added and disconnected the phone. He was afraid that if he continued to talk to his wife, he wouldn't be able to stand it and would tell her everything. He would never know the truth. Finally, the familiar scenery flashed outside the window. Jacob pulled into Chicago. The closer he got to the house, the more he shuddered. Because of her pregnancy, Adriana slept in her room. And that, for Ethan, was a good thing. He realized that he would have to make a great effort not to give himself away. And to do that, he needed to see Adriana as little as possible right now. The car pulled into the courtyard. Jacob almost collapsed outside the house from fatigue and overexertion. He gathered all his strength and went inside the house. Everywhere was dark, and the man realized that his wife was already asleep. "Well, thank God," he muttered. "And tomorrow I'll get up for work, and she won't see me. And now she's up late." Despite his hunger, Jacob went straight to his bedroom. He didn't even have the energy to think, so he immediately fell into sleep. It was almost 7 o'clock a.m. when Jacob woke up. He walked into the kitchen. The servants were not there yet. Had a coffee and a sandwich and got his things. Went to the hospital. Maria hadn't arrived yet, and to distract himself, Jacob started filling out patient files. "How did you suddenly say someone's voice behind his back?" "Jacob, are you okay?" Concerned asked the nurse, seeing the pale face of the surgeon. "Is something wrong?" "Maria, yes. Everything is fine." Barely pronounced sleep. "It's okay. I was so nervous. And I was up all night with her too. But the main thing is that everything is all right." Stroke on the shoulder of the surgeon. "Maria, are you going to be able to work today?" He tried to smile. "David won't be able to fill in for me all the time." "Well, that's true," confirmed the nurse. "Although yesterday he and I rested most of the day. We had one open fracture and a shattered head with a concussion." "Well, that's good. I was getting worried that David had gotten a kick out of me yesterday," Jacob replied. It must be your bad luck, she laughed. How's your shift going? We're in trouble. Anna Sergeyevna James was the second daughter of a famous rich man. As a girl, she grew up willful and capricious. From childhood, she pulled the whole blanket on herself, because the family formed the opinion that all her needs and desires must be fulfilled. Father, by the way, was not against it. He was impressed by her inexhaustible energy and desire to live. Adriana could sometimes behave recklessly, for which from time to time got into some unpleasant stories. Her passion was not only movement, learning something new, but also the attention of other people. It became a real drug for the girl. Adriana went crazy when people bowed before her, when they ran after her, when they could not live without her. When the girl studied in Europe, she learned to manipulate people quite well. So many guys who went crazy about her were dizzy. The girl herself was just playing with them. That's how it was with Mike at first. He was the son of very rich parents, and as it turned out, he was spoiled even more than Adriana. The girl had heard about him for a long time and wanted to get to know him better. Naturally, she was not particularly interested in simple guys on such. She just practiced her seduction skills. But for marriage, the girl considered only a guy from a very rich family, Mike. She had already seen him several times before she met him, and she liked him. The guy was really good. When they first met at a party, Adriana did her best to attract Mike to her, and she succeeded. The guy quickly became interested in her. 2 weeks later, they started dating. Adriana first tried to reform Mike. He was irresponsible, and the relationship was never serious. But then his father and mother got involved. They liked the idea that Adriana could marry Mike, so his father had a very serious talk with the guy. Adriana and the guy dated for almost 3 years when the wedding date was set, but she always knew that he had someone on the side all the time. Before the wedding, the girl gave him an ultimatum. Mike wasn't used to that kind of thing. He turned out to be a pretty violent and vindictive guy. Mike, you have to realize that your free relationship is over. Adriana said to the guy, you're going to get married soon, and you're going to have a family. Adriana, you don't have to tell me how to live my life. He looked at her angrily. I decide how I want to live my life. If you don't like it, get out. Are you out of your mind? The girl got angry. I'll tell your father everything. Let's see how you sing when he takes everything away from you. Don't cross me. He stared intently into her eyes. I won't spare you, Adriana. Don't play games with me. We'll see about that. Furious, she shouted. I'll talk to your parents. I think you have a lot to lose, so you'll listen to them. Mike was not used to being told what he should do. Even his parents couldn't influence him. But the guy realized that Adriana could blackmail him and make his parents take everything away from him for a while until he changed. His parents were on her side. All right, Adriana, I'll show you how fast I got rid of you, clenched his fists. After their conversation, the guy did just that. At the wedding, Adriana and her parents were completely embarrassed. Her father was just freaking out at the time. He really didn't know what to do, as circles on the water quickly spread rumors that Adriana, the daughter of one of the richest people, turned out to be an ordinary wench. Father was going crazy in those days. The only thing he could see was to marry off his daughter urgently. Of course, from his circle, no one would have agreed to such a thing back then. So they had to find a decent family for Adriana's temporary marriage, so to speak. At the time, it didn't matter who it was. He had a few guys in mind, but Adriana chose the son of an old surgeon Ethan knew. Adriana, I don't care, he told his wife. The important thing is that he marries Adriana officially now, and then we'll look for a suitable match for her. James, but we are taking such a risk, the wife replied. What if they have children? Then no one will marry a decent family. That's what you'll do with her, replied the man. Though you all will tell you what doctor to visit and how to protect her from unwanted pregnancy. Lucy, I want to solve all this in a year. 2 at the most, no more. Adriana's wedding was modest. There were only her parents and a few other acquaintances from Jacob's side of the family. It had happened so fast that not Max, Ethan's friend, not Emily and Adriana's sister could make it. You could tell it was a private ceremony. A year later, Adriana's parents had already found the right person for her. Kevin was the son of a banker. Their fortune was estimated only much less than James's. The guy had married an ordinary Italian woman a few years ago. He had studied in Italy for 5 years, and when it came time to play the wedding to the girl his parents had picked up for him, he found himself already married. His parents gave him a huge scandal and even disowned him. This Kevin did not embarrass Kevin in the slightest, and he continued to live his life. In Italy, he worked so that he had no problems with the maintenance of his family. One day, the Kevins were visiting James and told him about how their son lives now. "It's such a shame. Such shame," through tears, Kevin's mother said. "We still can't get over it. Maybe you should introduce him to a nice girl." Lucy mother Adriana came up with an amazing idea. "Maybe he'll like her and forget about your Italian, Kevin." "Where are we going to find one of those?" sighed the boy's father. "And all the nice unmarried girls will wait for him, won't they? Now we have to run after him and woo him to make him forget his Italian." "You know, Liam, we have Adriana living with that surgeon too." Through tears, said James. "It was such a mistake to marry her off to a simple man. It's been a year now, and my girl is just dying, I told her after Europe. And my daughter, wait, your man will come along." And she wanted to take revenge on Mike and married the first man she met. You know how my heart aches for her. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my daughter. She's already so sorry. She wants her surgeons to divorce her. She says if I could find a good guy who could love me, I'd leave my husband Jacob right away. "Yes, you're in the same trouble," sighed Mrs. Kavina. "Why didn't our children meet before? Maybe then they would have found their happiness in each other? Or maybe it's not too late," cautiously said Lucy. "We're going to Italy to our villa in a month. We could invite Kevin to stay with us." "That's not a bad idea," his eyes sparkled. "Why don't you bring your daughter? Let them get to know each other." Everything was ready to leave for Italy. James called his daughter Adriana to him. "This is your chance." He looked at her sternly. "You didn't miss it. Kevin is the son of very wealthy people, and being related to a banker will be good for us. I can do business with him." "Dad, all right." My daughter looked at him. "Let's say we like each other. Then what am I supposed to do with Ethan? What about your daughter? What could be the problem with him?" The man laughed. "We'll file for divorce right away. If Ethan makes any claims against me, I'll give him money. That'll keep him quiet, especially after he stopped practicing because of his illness. That kind of money will do him good." James was from the village, but the race for more money had changed him so much that he had forgotten that he had once been such a simple fellow. Now he saw himself as an overlord who could make or buy anyone. Ethan and his son were just things he had used, and now he could throw away. So in Italy, Kevin's first meeting with Adriana had been a success. At least that's how it seemed to the girl's young father. "It's strange," Kevin thought. "I don't know them, and they talk to me like I was a good friend. Maybe their father sent them." After the first meeting, he was impressed, not by Adriana, but by everything that had happened. James asked him to go with them to Sicily for a weekend, and he agreed. He had only been there once before. He wanted to visit those places again. Adriana said, breathing in the air of Sicily, "How beautiful it is here. Kevin, I even envy you. Can you come here every weekend?" "It's not that simple, Adriana," he objected. "I have to work. That's why I don't always have enough time or money to travel. We rent a place in the Dominican Republic. We don't have our own place yet. Doesn't your father help you?" "Watch out," asked the girl. "Uncle Liam, as far as I know, is a rich man." "Yes, he has a lot of money," sighed the boy. "But I don't need it. I chose my own happiness. My parents didn't support me in that." "And I understand you," Adriana replied with annoyance in her voice. "I was in the same situation. When I got married to a simple surgeon, my parents stopped talking to me. I was just torn and metal. But as time went on, I realized they were right. Ethan and I are so different that I'm just unhappy with him." "And you're okay with that life?" "No," but Kevin looked at her. "I love the Dominican Republic. I don't care what my parents think. It is difficult, of course, to live on my own after a fully provided for life, but I am coping so far." That day they visited the most beautiful places in Sicily, swooning in the sea. And she was all right. A thought flashed through Kevin's mind. What am I talking about? He quickly stopped himself, but after that day, the James family with Kevin became a good tradition to go somewhere on the weekend. The Russians spent exactly 1 month at their villa. James, thank you very much for the communication, for our meetings. The guy shook the man's hand in farewell. I was very glad to meet you. Mutually, Igor hugged him. James, you turned out to be a good guy. I don't know why your parents are so upset with you. I wouldn't let a son like that go anywhere. The James family. They so unobtrusively got into Kevin's soul that after they left, the guy couldn't come to his senses for a long time. He felt like he was missing something. A few weeks passed, and he decided to give James Nikolaevich a call. Igor, hello. James rejoiced. I'm so glad to hear from you. How are you doing? How is Italy? Everything is fine, answered the guy. And how are you doing? How's it going? We are doing well so far, thank God, replied the man. Adriana is suffering though. If you want, I'll give you her phone number. Maybe she'll talk to you. We were so happy that our girl in Italy came back to life, but as soon as we got home, she is again always alone and won't let anyone near her. Well, okay, Kevin replied. Maybe I cheered her up a little. The guy didn't even notice that he had tied a noose around his neck. Talking to Adriana on the phone made her even more attractive, and when Adriana flew to the villa, the next thing you know, they were having an affair. The girl got everything she dreamed of. Kevin was really after her. He took risks. Adriana became an object of adoration for him. For about a year, the girl flew to Italy every 2 or 3 months. But Kevin was not going to divorce his Italian wife yet. James realized that he just had to bide his time. After a year and a half, Kevin filed divorce papers. Adriana hoped that in a couple of months, she would already be able to divorce Ethan and marry Kevin. But Dominika went on principle and created a lot of problems for Kevin. Therefore, they divorced with scandals and constant lawsuits. It took almost 2 years. Finally, all the documents were received, and Kevin could return to his family. His parents lived in New York, and he left Italy to continue his father's business. Kevin's child was madly happy that their son finally understood everything and made the right choice in his life. When Kevin came to New York, he and Adriana found it easier to see each other. He started coming to Chicago often. Sometimes he and Adriana would meet at her parents' house. But most of all, they preferred the privacy of their villa. It was the old Villa James that her father had given to his daughter for her wedding. Therefore, Adriana felt at home there. The girl found out that she was pregnant weeks before she and her husband went to Turkey. So she set everything up. So she and Ethan made everything work out. While on vacation, her husband didn't count the days much, so he went along with everything right away. It was impossible to tell that Adriana and Kevin were planning a baby. It looked as if it had happened by accident. But the girl knew for sure that the baby was from him with Ethan. She had been on birth control pills for all the years, so she couldn't get pregnant with him. Adriana realized that now she would have to deal with the Ethan issue, and her father had already insisted on it. But she had her own reason for delaying the divorce, which neither of them knew. James was born and raised in a small village. He came from a poor family. As a teenager, he fell in love with a neighbor girl, Katya. Therefore, when the guy was 20 years old, his choice was already determined. It must be said that James was a young man with great ambitions. In the village, he did not want to stay. And after the wedding, he and Kate immediately moved to the city. The first years of life in the city were very difficult for them. James got a job as a laborer in the road service and quickly mastered the work of road machines. The boy realized that this industry can be a bottomless one. Old roads are being repaired and new ones are being built all the time. So he rented a roller and grader and hired a few guys. After a year, he was already able to buy back his equipment. After a couple more years, he had his own road construction company. This could stop and live well, but the ambitious guy wanted to go even further. He invested all his money in an engineering plant. 10 years later, James, aged 35, became the owner of one of the largest road construction equipment factories in the world. Perhaps he was lucky in life. Perhaps it was his inflexibility that helped him. But he did get his way, and everything would have gone on as it was if Kate hadn't died. Their first daughter was born when Kate was almost 28 years old. Their life was full of stress, so they could not have children earlier. After the birth of their daughter, the girl could not recover for a long time, and a year later she was diagnosed with cancer. James what only did not do, but to save his wife he never managed. It cannot be said that the young man was heartbroken. Sure, he grieved for a while, but James became so addicted to money that it became for him the only goal in life. It was almost 2 years later when he began to think about getting married. His little daughter Emily was under the care of a governess all the time. In this, the man knew no problems, but he wanted to have a solid status in society, and his condition as a widower did not help him in any way. Even then, James began to think about a girl from a rich family. "I've already reached such horizons that I don't need a wire anymore," he told himself looking in the mirror. "I've worked so hard to get to a position in society that I'm not going to fall for any romance." James once at a call at a nobleman's party, he said that he was going to marry and was looking for a suitable candidate. Naturally, the girl had to be from a rich family, well-bred, educated. The rumor reached William's house. He had a daughter named Lucy, but she was so spoiled that her parents had been unable to marry her for nearly 7 years. The girl's temper was simply unbearable. "Lucy, listen to me," the father said to his daughter. "This is your last chance. Do what you want, but this James forget." Here's another crossed her arms on her chest girl. "I don't need this redneck. Then I'll marry you off tomorrow to the first man I see." In a rage, said the man, "You understand me, and you will get nothing more from us." Lucy saw that her father was not joking and was very frightened with her demands. To stay with some beggar on the street for her was tantamount to death. The girl repeated for several more days, but her father did not give up his position. Then Lucy tried to manipulate her mother. "Don't even think that I will ask your father for you." Coldly, she replied, "You've gotten on our nerves so much that I'll be the first. Who's going to kick you out of the house?" "Mom, but he has a daughter." I tried to find the right argument. "You didn't want the guys we offered you all those years ago," my mother said angrily. "They didn't have any children. Now you have to solve this problem yourself." The acquaintances organized a dinner, or rather, a viewing for James and Lucy. The girl tried to restrain her arrogance. She herself realized that at her age, and she was already 28, it's not easy to find a guy who matches her needs. You could say it was an official marriage of convenience. It was a big wedding. The father was so happy to finally get rid of his daughter that he spared no money for the wedding. At first, Lucy thought that Emily would be a big problem for her. But to her happiness, the girl grew up very calm. She lent herself well to the education of her nannies. Yes, and James, her husband, did not spend much time with his daughter. His new wife didn't see the girl as much. At this stage, things were going well for Lucy. She didn't have to make a scene when her husband spent too much time with her daughter. But as Emily began to grow older, she, like any teenager, began to show interest in all areas of life. When Adriana Lucy was born, they immediately separated her from her older sister. Therefore, strange as it may sound, the children did not see each other that often. When Adriana was 8 years old, she had her first scandal. Emily and her toys were playing in the garden. The girl ran up to her, started throwing her toys around the sides of the llama doll's hands. "What are you doing?" Shocked, shouted Emily. "Why are you breaking my dolls?" "Yours," laughed 8-year-old Adriana. "Nothing here is yours. Everything here is mine. Get out of here. This is my house too," protested her sister. "Give me my dolls. Leave me alone." "Ah, so evil," shouted Adriana. "Are you gonna get it now?" She started yelling with all her might. It felt like she was being cut. After 5 minutes, the mother came running, and "Daughter, what happened?" She asked worriedly and looked angrily at Emily. "She took my dolls and started breaking them," screamed the girl, "and then she hit me." "Are you out of your mind?" Furious, said Lucy. "Go to your room. I won't let you play in the garden anymore." That evening, there was a scandal between husband and wife. Lucy did not want to give up her position. "Wherever you want her and take her," she shouted. "But she won't be in our house anymore." "Lucy, she's my daughter. James replied sternly, "No need to throw words around. Okay, then Adriana and I will leave this house today," calmly replied his wife. "In a few days I will send you the divorce papers." "All right," the husband got angry. "I will send Emily to a boarding house in Italy." James finally gave in. After the daughter from her first marriage was expelled from the house, Adriana became a real mistress there. The first time Emily was able to be at home was not until she was 16. The father invited his daughter home for summer vacation, so she showed up. Adriana greeted her. "No one was expecting you here. I came to see my father, not you. I tried to talk some sense into my little sister Emily, so don't let it bother you." But Adriana couldn't accept it. Every day she thought of something to do. The girl would put the ice cream on the chair, locked her door so she couldn't get out, threw a fly or a spider in her plate. "Adriana, when are you going to calm down?" Emily once said to her, "Don't you realize I don't need any of this? You can have this house and your father's wealth. You're the one who doesn't understand me," she shouted angrily. "I just hate you. I would be the happiest person in the world if I could see you dead now. At your funeral, I would have laughed for a very long time." Why did Adriana hate Emily so much? She didn't know. But she sensed some inner strength in her sister, and it hurt her deeply. Adriana had always known that she was really a coward. She was a worthless girl. Adriana would never be able to survive without her father and his money. Emily, on the other hand, seemed to be able to adapt to everything. No other country frightened her. Not like at the boarding house, where the children were treated very strictly. Adriana had always felt that compared to her older sister, she looked like a pacifier. That was probably one of the reasons why the girl wanted adoration. In the back of her mind, she was afraid that any guy would choose Emily over her. After that visit, Emily did not appear at her father's house for a long time. Yes, and the girl entered the institute and all her attention focused on her studies. Even though Adriana had already studied in Europe and her father's house no longer attracted her. But on her sister's 20th birthday, her father insisted that his eldest daughter came to her birthday party. Adriana resisted this for a long time. She even argued with her father, but he did not change his decision. Let them finally establish a normal relationship with each other, her father thought. Adriana had changed a little during this time. She stopped feeling so much aggression towards her sister. In the first place, everyone confirmed that the girl was much prettier than Emily. In the second place, all the numerous fans of Adriana, whom she had broken her heart in Europe, gave her some self-confidence. "Hello, sister," she greeted Emily snidely. "I hope you're not here for long." "And I'm glad to see you," Adriana calmly replied Emily. "Unfortunately, I can only stay here for a few days. We have a summer internship at the institute. I can't miss it." "That's good," Adriana said cheerfully. "I think I'll put up with you for a few days." There were a lot of people at Adriana's birthday party. Her mother wanted to show everyone how much her daughter had grown up. Emily sat alone, far away from everyone. She didn't know any of the guests. Suddenly, she saw Ethan's familiar face. She said excitedly, "How happy am I to see you? And this must be Jacob. Don't you remember me? You and I together tied the bloody paw of one dog." Emily said in amazement, "Honestly, you've changed a lot. How are you doing? I hear you are studying in Italy." The girl and the boy talked about something for a long time. They reminisced about their childhood and the few times they had met together. Emily was very sweet and open. Jacob hadn't expected that from her. At all. Emily's father didn't talk about her much. All his hopes and plans were connected with Adriana. Suddenly, the host appeared on the stage, and the party began. A few minutes later, the birthday girl came up to him as well. God was amazed. Boy, this Adriana. Yeah, she's a real hottie. Emily wanted to continue the conversation with Ethan, but it was as if he wasn't listening to her anymore. All his attention was absorbed by Adriana. The girl saw how he approached her and told her something admiringly. A few days later, Jacob showed up at their yard. "Jacob, hello." She ran out to meet him. "Emily, you're coming to visit us. Where is Adriana?" The guy asked the girl. "She's at home. I'd like to take her for a walk. Is she on the phone with someone at home? Answered Emily. Let's go have some lemonade and talk about something. She took her guest by the hand. They were laughing merrily when Adriana appeared on the terrace. She had a very displeased look on her face. But seeing how happy Emily was, the girl decided to take advantage of the situation. Jacob, why don't we go for a ride together? She laughed. Come on, hurry up, take my hand and let's go. The guest wanted to say something to Emily, but Adriana pulled him forward so much that he had to look under his feet not to fall. Good boy, Jacob, Emily thought. Why is Adriana doing all this? After all, she's going to play with him and leave him. The next day, Emily flew to Italy. The girl did not notice that she began to think about her acquaintance all the time. Jacob seemed to her that guy about whom only one can dream. She felt care and inner strength and tenderness in him. They liked the way he recited poetry. He had a sensitive nature. Adriana could never understand such a man. And the next day at 7 o'clock, a cab was waiting for her and took her to the airport in New York. As soon as Emily found out that she was pregnant, she immediately told her father. It made no sense to her to hide it. "Emily, why have you embarrassed me like this?" James lamented. "What am I going to tell people now?" "You will," she replied calmly. "My daughter fell in love with a simple boy, and I wouldn't let her marry him." "What an asshole." Lucy Vladimirovna was angry. "How can you be so ungrateful, Jamesa? Stop babysitting her. I demand that you forbid her to come home. Let her stay in her Italy." Despite what happened to Mom, James didn't wish his daughter harm. But he did what his wife said. They were forbidden to come to the USA. Her father gave her a villa in Italy for the first time, and her mother took a sabbatical at the Institute and finished it when Sophia was born. The father helped his daughter financially all this time. A year later, Emily learned that Adriana was marrying Jacob. The girl was very hurt by this, but she realized that the guy needed time to see who Adriana really was. At their wedding, naturally, she was not present. Emily felt that no one but Ethan held any interest in her. She transferred all her love for him to their baby girl, Sophia. A year passed after Adriana returned to the USA and got married. Suddenly, Emily's father informed her that they were all flying to Italy together. The girl did not know why, but she got a bad feeling from this news. Everyone arrived at the villa. Emily did not really want to communicate with her relatives, so she and her daughter tried to go somewhere for a while. And everyone looked coldly at the girl. "Emily, we have an important guest tomorrow." Her father once told her, "I'd like to ask you not to interfere in our affairs." "I don't care at all." Dryly, she replied, "I don't have to be there at all." "No, you must be present." Father replied sternly, "And remember, you're divorced. Your rich husband left you for a mistress." At first, the girl couldn't understand what it all meant. But after the meeting with the important guest, everything began to fall into place. My God, are they marrying Adriana to Kevin? Horrified, she thought. Emily hadn't been on all of their trips. But before they flew back, she did approach her father. "Dad, what's this all about?" She asked him bluntly. "Are you imposing on Adriana, Kevin?" "Emily, but you are a grown woman and should realize that Jacob is not suitable for us." Father answered calmly. "He has already fulfilled his role, and I am very grateful to him for that. But it's time for Adriana to look for a better husband. Kevin's parents are very rich, and he has connections." The father looked at his daughter. "Is that any way to play with people? Jacob, he's not a toy. He's not a thing. That's no way to treat people. Do you understand that? Emily, not crossing the line." James looked at her angrily. "You're talking to me, girl, who's with some beggar. Just for the fun of it. Don't piss me off, or you and your freaks will stay on the street. Don't call Sophia that." The daughter answered boldly. "Thank God, Mom didn't live to see what a monster you've turned into. I don't want anything from you. I give you exactly 3 years." Her father approached her in a rage, so that not you, not this one, would be in my life. "You understand me. In 3 years, you leave my villa." Emily was in shock from the conversation with her father. She couldn't believe he could have changed so much. Everything human in him seemed to have died. There was nothing to hold on to. "If I am no longer your daughter," the girl sobbed, "I don't have a father anymore. As soon as I finish university, I will leave here at once." During the next year, Adriana constantly flew to Italy and lived in a villa with her lover. During this time, Emily and her daughter only spent the night there. Finally, the girl could be put in daycare, and Emily returned not only to the Institute, but also began to work. The girl studied to be an architect. After she learned that Kevin divorced his wife and moved to the USA, Emily became very worried. The girl was most afraid for Jacob. Her father had stopped feeling compassion for people, and she was afraid that he might do Jacob some harm. Almost a year passed, and she finally decided to come to the USA. Emily and her daughter looked at the old, shabby houses. It was her only possession. The house had belonged to her mother's parents long ago. When they died, her father deeded it to Emily. "It's a wonderful home. You and I." The woman hugged her 4-year-old daughter. "Sophia, do you feel okay with the accent?" The little girl said. Emily finally received her diploma, and now she had to decide what to do next. She wanted to talk to Ethan right away and tell him everything about his daughter, Adriana's lovers, and the fact that he was just being used. But even before she left, she got a call from a woman who had worked as a maid in the house for many years and who loved Emily like a daughter. Aunt Vanessa told her that Adriana was pregnant. The woman realized that there were a lot of unknowns in this whole story. The last time Adriana flew to the villa, a very unpleasant conversation took place between them. "Adriana, why are you doing this to Ethan? He loves you." Emily started the conversation. "You know, if it wasn't for you, I would have left him a long time ago." She laughed, just the joy of being hurt. "Making me put up with him for so many years. You think I don't know Sophia is his daughter? She looks exactly like him. You thought if you slept with him, he'd be yours. But it didn't work out. You couldn't get back at me. You ended up losing everything. I'm going to drag it out until the end so I know how much you're suffering. Don't expect me to let him go so easily. You're probably dreaming that I'll divorce him, and he'll finally be yours." Adriana, "Jacob, not a thing." Her older sister looked at her sternly. "If I wanted him, I would have gotten him a long time ago. I have the most important trump card on my hands. If anything, Ethan and I have a child together." And once again, Emily's candor became her fatal mistake. Adriana had been thinking of ways to get Kevin pregnant ever since, but to make Jacob always think the child was his. So even when she divorces him, he will come to see the baby. And then Adriana can play with it over and over again. It took her almost a year to do it. The father was very angry. "What's the matter?" He said, "We're all set to get married to Kevin. Dad, I need a little more time to deal with Ethan." Adriana replied, "But after she got pregnant, her parents couldn't wait any longer. It was decided that if Adriana wouldn't tell, then James would then talk to Ethan's father and tell him everything in 2 months. The only problem was whether or not to say who Adriana had a child with." Where are you going with this? Adriana was angry with her father. "You're ruining my business." No one really knew what it was all about. After the failed wedding in Europe, she had such a chance to take revenge on her sister that the girl was just glad. She didn't necessarily have to marry Jacob. Her father had picked other temporary options by then, but Adriana had insisted on him. Emily didn't have any particular plan. She just wanted to tell the truth. Jacob. But she knew she needed proof for this conversation. Her Aunt Vanessa had told her that Kevin had visited them often. It was clear from their conversations with Adriana that they liked to go to their old summer house. Before coming to the USA, Emily had talked to her good Italian friend Andrea. He did all sorts of video, communications, and hardware. So he told them at the time that detectives are not needed now. You just put bugs in and you're all set. In New York, the woman met a man who promised them to her. So all that was left was to arrive at the cottage without anyone noticing her and set it all up. Bye. It was a little hard to go to such things with her daughter. So she left her daughter at Aunt Vanessa's for one evening. Not bad at architecture, she quickly found the right place and discreetly set up a mini camera. Emily and her daughter lived in the village in the old house for the time being. Finally, after a few days on her laptop, the woman saw what was happening at Villa. She quickly cut a small video and took pictures using a SIM card she had bought in the USA. The woman sent everything to the right address. Ethan and Emily found the phone number easily. She called the hospital and made up a story that Jacob had asked her to call her back urgently, but his number wasn't answering. In this story, Emily was undergoing surgery. At first, no one wanted to reveal such information, but when the woman burst into tears, the nurse on duty could not stand it. It had been 3 days now, and Jacob just couldn't find a place to go. He wanted so badly to tell his wife everything, but he had a feeling that Anonymous would show up again. If it wasn't for the surgeries he had to focus on Man, it seemed like he would have lost his mind. But there was a great benefit to having some time to himself. Jacob went back over and over again and tried to figure out why he had gotten all this obsession. He reasoned about why he was attracted to them in the first place. He could see clearly now that she and he had always been radically different. He occasionally read some books, especially poetry, and watched informative movies, but his wife spent her days mindlessly. She seemed to have no purpose at all. Naturally, Adriana didn't work anywhere, but there was basically nothing to talk to her about. She never wanted to discuss serious topics. I don't even know why I married her. Finishing the operation, thought the surgeon, even after I found out she was pregnant. Adriana has absolutely no maternal feelings. She has always been interested only in her life. She's just obsessed with herself, and basically she's empty inside. God, I can't believe I never noticed that before. There's nothing inside her. It's like a pretty, shiny wrapper covering up an empty candy bar. At first it seems like there's bound to be a lot of value behind such a fanatic. But there's nothing there, nothing at all. That day, Ethan had a major turning point in his life. He realized that he had no love for Adriana and never had. She had simply shifted her gaze to his dream, and he believed it. In fact, they were so different that there had never been any point to their relationship. Even if she's carrying my child, the man told himself, I'll divorce her anyway. Adriana, as the dream of the perfect woman for me, was dead forever. I wanted to be deceived. Now I'm reaping the result. Thank God it all happened now and not when I'm 50 years old, and nobody will need me anymore. After all, somewhere there is my woman who will not only love me, but will be able to see me. Jacob was very reluctant to go home. Maria had already left, and he had stayed on the pretext of finishing his business. He rested his head on his hands and settled on his desk. He was about to fall into sleep when he heard distinctive sounds, grudgingly pulled out his phone. We need to meet tonight at 8 at the Faro Cafe. I sent you pictures of your wife. So he showed up after all, as I thought, said the doctor. All right, let's meet. Let's see what else you can tell me. Jacob left the hospital. He didn't want to be late. 7:45. He was already there. Hello, Jacob, said someone above his head. How are you doing? Emily? He said in astonishment. What are you doing here? Didn't expect to see you here. Yeah, I have a very important work meeting. I'm sorry, we can meet later and talk. The man looked at the girl carefully. The facial features looked familiar to him. Oh shit, he cursed. If Emily leaves, I won't see her again. And I'd really like to talk to her. So be it. Emily, wait. He jumped up and ran after the woman. Honestly, I'm so happy to see you. What about your meeting? She smiled. Can we meet another day? No, Emily, do I need you now? Unexpectedly, Jacob said. Emily, my family is falling apart, or rather, has already fallen apart. Adriana has a lover. How did you know that? She asked with interest. Did she tell you that? No, Jacob lowered his head. Someone sent me photos and videos of her with him at our villa. They were there. Well, anyway, you understand, Jacob, it was, I said calmly to Emily. The man didn't understand what she meant at first. He wanted her to explain it to him, but then it came to him. Emily did. You're in shock, he pronounced. But why? Jacob, I've loved you for years. The woman was embarrassed, but Adriana went on principle. She always hated me. She always felt like someone might have chosen me over her. It didn't just hurt her. It drove her crazy. So she knew about it all along. The man said with pale lips. Yes, Emily replied. She played you on purpose to hurt me. And when her wedding in Europe broke up, she took the opportunity to psychologically kill me. Jacob, her father could have chosen someone else for her at that point. They only needed you for a couple years to shut her down and embarrass her back. Her father was going to marry her off to someone else anyway. So he only asked father then because they needed the right man at that moment. The doctor paled for a while. They were planning to use me from the beginning and then throw me away, the woman said sadly, and they found a replacement very quickly. In Italy, she seduced a guy who was the son of rich people. Or rather, as I understand it, they all planned it together. Kevin was married to an Italian woman at the time, and his parents disowned him for it. Things worked out with Adriana, and about a year ago, he finally got a divorce. Jacob, his and Adriana's wedding had been planned for a long time. God, I'm such a fool. The doctor's head in his hands. I naively believed in their good intentions. I had hoped to the end that Adriana would accept me. But why didn't she file for divorce right away? She had her own personal reasons. Emily replied and stroked her daughter's head. I would never have gotten involved in any of this. And I apologize to you, Jacob, but Jacob, do you remember the day you got drunk and came over? Oh, and I was really drunk then. The man sighed. The only thing I remember is getting in the car, and that was it. I had a fight with myself that day, the interviewee began, but I couldn't fly out that night because there were no tickets. I was wandering down the street by the courtyard. Suddenly, I saw your car and stopped you. I realized you were drunk. You were going with Adriana to confront her. You were going to tell her everything. By some miracle, I talked you down, and we drove to your house. But at one point you stopped and started hitting on me. We got out of the car. You thought I was Adriana. I tried to get away from you, but you caught me, Jacob. I did it on my own. It was a conscious decision because I loved you. Are you saying that there was something between us? I don't believe my ears, the doctor interjected. Yes, she replied shortly, and I have proof. I can even show it to you. What kind of proof? In shock, asked Jacob. He was making an effort to believe all this. Sophia put her arm around the girl. Your daughter Ethan Candle became dizzy from overexertion and began to faint. Jacob slapped the women on his cheeks. Jacob, wake up. The doctor opened his eyes. Standing in front of him was an agitated Emily. Sophia was looking intently into his eyes. I'm sorry, it was probably too much even for me. Coming to his senses, the man said, God, I have a daughter. Who would have thought it? He whispered. Jacob, what's pregnant with Kevin? Emily finished her story. She said that you would always think it was your child, even when you divorced her. So she needed time for you to get used to the role. But what was all that for? Screamed the doctor. I'm beginning to think she's mentally disturbed. Maybe, replied Emily calmly. She wished I'd never gotten you. In her dreams, you were supposed to chase her around like a dog. And it didn't matter that she had another husband now. You were supposed to remain loyal to her to the end and grateful for your supposed child. Jacob Ethan realized that he needed to be alone and process all of this. He had said goodbye to his mother then, without understanding why, but he wanted very much to take the girl in his arms and kiss her. But he restrained his impulse. For several days, Jacob woke up. Finally, the whole mosaic came together and he was able to decide what to do next. After work, he took his wife and they drove to her father's house. Jacob, what's the matter? Adriana protested. Couldn't this wait until tomorrow? No, he answered briefly. I've waited too long as it is. They pulled up in front of the big house. Jacob asked everyone to gather in the living room. James looked at him unhappily. So let's begin. Spoke calmly to his son-in-law. Let's probably go from the very end. And carries a child by another man. The father and his wife turned pale. He realized that nothing more could be hidden. Soon you will perform the wedding of your daughter Adriana to Kevin, with whom she is pregnant, the doctor continued. You, James, never wanted me to marry Adriana. But when trouble came to you, you just used me as a staging post. God judge you for that. And now you. Adriana. He looked at his wife. This is the last day we'll be together. Tomorrow I'll divorce you. But for all the suffering you've caused Emily, don't expect to find happiness. You're incapable of love. And there will be someone who will treat you the way you've treated me and everyone else. And I'll tell you honestly, if you hadn't gotten involved, we might be happy together by now. I know Sophia is my daughter. For the first time in her life, Adriana didn't know what to say to her. Everything Jacob had said was true. Her war that she had set up with them had so consumed her entire life that she had no chance of winning from the start. There was complete silence in the living room. There was no point in lying or denying it. And if you try to smear me in any way or make up any sordid stories, James, I'm talking to you personally. I have footage of your daughter frolicking in our villa with her lover. That will be all. I do hope our paths never cross again. The man ran out of his father-in-law's house and went to his house. His mind was racing, but Jacob realized that he needed to get some sleep. He took a sleeping pill and fell asleep immediately. The next day, when he came home from work, his ex-wife's things were gone. What a petty idiot James is. Jacob said in shock, looking at the fact that the furniture in his mind had been removed. He must be getting back at me. Let him take everything. I'll still have the walls. And they're mine. I bought this house with my own money. He can't take it away from me. The next day was supposed to be his day off. He jumped back in the car, set the navigator, and followed its instructions. It must have been about 3 hours when he finally saw the name he wanted. Where is the old house of Kate's parents, James' ex-wife? Asked Jacob, sitting behind the yard of the old man. Yes, on the next street over. He looked curiously at the stranger and showed him his hand. Jacob stopped his car where his grandfather told him someone ran out of the house. Daddy is here, Sophia shouted joyfully. Daddy, I love you so much, and I love you. He picked the girl up in his arms and started kissing her. God, how have I missed you all this time? I always felt inside that you existed. Jacob, hi. I'm outside. But how are you doing? She smiled. Now I'm doing well. Looked Jacob, the woman intently in the eyes. Now I have a real family, and I will not let you or Sophia go anywhere else.
Subscribe and click the bell. I don't understand what the problem is. If I am 43 years old and I have never been married, and I have no children, for some reason, my relatives don't like this situation at all. Their only desire in this life is to help me start a family. But how can they not realize that help is needed only when they ask for it? I have never regretted being single for a second. Not having children is such a gift from God. In fact, it's entirely my fault. I've always been careful. Protection above all else. Otherwise, at some point in your life, your potential children will come to you from all over the country, even from places you've never been. The mother, of course, is the one who worries the most. Even when my father was alive, she constantly tried to organize meetings with potential candidates for the role of my wife. All this looked as if quite by chance, the daughter of my mother's friend or colleague, or one of her students came to visit us. The options for calling these damsels names were countless. When her father passed away, she became more obsessive. In addition to constantly arranging so-called chance encounters, this is how she began to constantly drip on my brain. After I celebrated my 40th birthday, it was like she went crazy. It got to the point where I couldn't live with her. Basically, I was never ashamed of living with my parents. I was fine with it. I only came to this house to sleep over or have dinner. I work all the time. Even on weekends, I wanted to always get a big paycheck to constantly develop in this field. I did get more and more money every month, but still it was not enough for me. Why should I give up money if all I need to do is to spend a little more time in the office? I did not aspire to be a supervisor. Unlike a supervisor, my earnings depended only on myself, and he had a fixed salary periodically. My salary was more than his by a factor of 1.5 to 2 times. So, what's wrong with an ordinary working man? Apart from that, there were other pluses in the fact that I was an ordinary staff worker, while on the colleagues occupying managerial positions, girls hung like on the hanger of the theater outerwear. There wasn't as much attention directed at me. I was fine with that. I was not at all turned on by the fact that the girls saw me as a huge wallet. I like to choose a girl myself and pursue her. I don't know how to woo. I used all the conventional ways. Of course, all these years I really tried to find my soulmate. But my longest relationships have lasted no more than 5 months. The last relationship sucked all the energy out of me. I was exhausted both physically and mentally. Her name was Kathy. She was 20 years younger than me. I thought it was kind of cool at first. She had an energy inside her that spread to those around her. For some reason, at the bar, she had her eye on me. I tried my best to ignore her. I didn't want to get involved with underage girls. But then she managed to get me talking. Kathy turned out to be a nice person to talk to, and the time flew by. That's how we talked. And in the morning, I woke up in my bed with this girl lying on my chest. Her beautiful, long, curly, red hair was lying on the pillow, and part of it covered her bare breasts. I'll be honest, she looked stunning in the morning sunlight. I was so engrossed that at times I forgot to breathe so as not to wake her up. From that day on, our so-called love began. That girl did unimaginable things to me, manipulated me any way she wanted. I fell for it. I did everything she wanted. I bought her a car after a month. Yes, not a new one, but still, jewelry, a fur coat, even though it was summer. Travel. I gave her everything. And what I got in return? What did I get in return? Sex. And that's about it. She didn't cook, she didn't clean. She partied all the time. It's getting a little hard for me to live at her pace. I wouldn't mind her partying all the time, as long as she was happy. But every time she didn't get enough. I didn't understand what I needed to do to make her calm down, settle down. I even asked her, but she only put forward conditions under which she was willing to bring peace to my world. But she never kept her promises. Every time she returned home, all intoxicated and intoxicated. Sometimes I thought it wasn't just the alcohol. But personally, I did not force her for this action and did not find anything suspicious at home. It was over in a flash. Somehow I wanted to please her, to arrange a romantic evening. So I did not, as usual, delayed at work. I went home right after the end of the day. On the way, I stopped by the store to buy a bunch of flowers. I knew she was home because just before I got there, she had called me and complained that her friends had canceled a meeting and she didn't know what to do that evening. I got home, walked into the hallway, and immediately ran through the apartment without noticing anything around the dining room was gone. Her in the living room went to the bedroom too. Well, you guessed what I saw there. As in the most bearded anecdotes, my beautiful, young, red-haired beauty was swallowed by some young man with milk on his lips. Not absolutely. Oh yeah. For all that, they were both naked and I stayed to watch it. They didn't notice me until about 7 minutes later. That's when I turned around and went into the living room. A couple minutes later, they both ran out of the bedroom. The guy headed straight for the exit, and Kathy headed for me. Why are you looking at me like it's my fault? I mean, it's not a big deal. David, I agree that it's an unpleasant situation, but let's be honest, it's entirely your fault. What are you out of your mind? How am I so guilty that you decided to ride another man? David, well, that's a lot of heat. It's very simple. You're a grown man and you should know where your behavior is leading. You chose me, knowing I'm half your age. You get caught up in work all the time, and I have certain needs. Henceforth, so that this doesn't happen again, pay more attention to me. Kathy, do you even see what you're saying? I'm always stuck at work because your appetites are growing by the day. And please tell me, when have I ever dared to deny myself your carnal needs? Well, it's never happened. I'm sure you deny me. Are you trying to make me complex? It's just that sometimes I have wild urges that need to be curbed, but you're not around. So sometimes I have to look for other options. I have to look. So it wasn't the only time, and you're so calm about it. No, it wasn't. Are you not hearing me at all? Well, reevaluate your life, and then we'll be fine. To say I was shocked is like saying nothing. I've never encountered such insolence. I'll be honest, I believed for a split second that I really was at fault for what had happened. I had to pull myself together, so I slapped my cheeks a couple times, and that helped. And then I got up, went into the hallway, grabbed Kathy's bag, then headed into the kitchen. The girl was drinking tea and looking out the window. I walked over to her, picked her up in my arms. Kathy thought I had admitted guilt and had come to make up. However, that was not the case. I went to the hallway and opened the front door. Kathy began to suspect something, so she started to pull away. But my grip was ironclad. I set her barefoot on the cold tile. Paul threw the bag on the floor and closed the door. Kathy still tried to bang on the door for a while and screamed all over the floor, but as soon as I threatened her with the police, she left. The girl was not happy that all her things were left at home, but I didn't care what she was wearing. Let her be happy that I left the car to her and go to the damn grandmother. After a while, I learned from acquaintances that Kathy knew from the beginning how much money I was making, That's why he was grooming me so much at the bar during our first meeting. At that moment, everything fell into place, and I was a fool to fall for her. It was probably just passion, though. If I had really fallen for her, I wouldn't have gotten rid of her so easily. Anyway, from that moment on, I wasn't interested in relationships anymore. All 3 years, I just chose women for fun even, and did not hide my income. Then things got easier. I just picked one day a week, went to a bar, and got what I wanted. If it was a busy week, I'd go to the bar 2 or 3 times. Mom saw my behavior change. She was always finding reasons for me to come to her when I met her, playing the same old songs. To be honest, I just let everything she said pass me by. After a while, I realized I couldn't let it go. Something must be done to calm my mother down. If she calmed down, my life would be at peace. I could think of nothing better to do than to find a fake bride. I had to choose a middle-aged woman because my mother would not fall for a young girl and continued to brainwash me. There were no single adult women in my neighborhood. I decided to look in the park. There was no time to wait, and it was Saturday. It was getting close to sundown, so there were a lot of people there. Probably a lot of visitors thought I was a maniac because I glare at every woman who even remotely fit my criteria. When I realized that I was frankly sad, I put on my glasses. I didn't want to end up for such a misunderstanding. And in the monkey house, they'd put a couple of cases on me. After 40 minutes, I found a woman who matched my requirements perfectly. I could tell she was a homemaker, but she wasn't a gray mouse. She looked delicious. A lot of young girls wouldn't have been on a par with her. Next to the woman was a boy of about 15 and a girl who was no more than 4 years old. I watched this family for about 30 minutes, and that's because I couldn't see. Is there a wedding ring on the ring finger of my potential bride's right hand? I tried to look from all angles, but nothing worked. Then I decided that I would sort of accidentally bump into her, and if there was no ring, I would meet her right away. I walked towards her and pushed her with my shoulder. Apparently, I didn't calculate my strength because the lady fell on the lawn. I didn't see that coming, and I was stunned. "Where are you going?" The guy brought me out of my trance. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I really didn't see you. You're all right." I rushed over to the woman to help her up. I was really afraid I'd hurt her. "Yes, thank you. I'm fine. Don't worry. I'm sure you didn't do it on purpose." God, how wrong was she? My face was getting angry paint. "Charles, don't be so rude. Not all people do harm on purpose. For God's sake, forgive my nephew. He's always protecting me since my husband left me." My gaze slid down her arm. There really was no ring. That's good news. What's even better news is that, pray tell, it's only her nephew. That fact made it much easier, because young boys are very wary of a potential stepfather, albeit a fictitious one. And I understand this is your young protector. You can tell he's ready to snatch me up with just a look. "Charles, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your aunt. Or maybe you did, but on the bed. She's a very pretty mademoiselle. I'd like to rectify the situation." "How is that possible?" "Well, for starters, I can take you to the infirmary so we can all make sure you're all right." "You what?" "Take it easy. But I've been rolling around in the grass a little bit. There's Betty already rolling around in the park every day." The woman pointed to the girl who was lying on the lawn with her own grass. "Well, then maybe we can get acquainted, and I'll buy you dinner, all of you." I stand corrected. We can get acquainted. I have to know the name of the person I'm supposed to avoid, in order not to end up on the grass again, the woman said with a smile. "My name is Adriana." "You have a very beautiful name, Adriana," said I in a languid voice, extending my hand. "And I am David. Our names sound similar. Maybe it's not a coincidence that we met." "Well, I don't know. It wasn't what you'd call a pleasant encounter." She seemed more confident than I first thought. "So how about dinner?" "My treat. Everybody dance, as they say." That's when the kid's eyes lit up. Apparently, his parents and Adriana didn't spoil him with much in the way of goodies. All right, but we'll have dinner without the kids. But the aunt pulled Charles' no aunts. Take Betty's hand and go home. There's everything in the refrigerator so you can satisfy your hunger. The adults need to talk. 3. What's that for? Let me drive them home. Why walk? And you won't have to worry. I'm not gonna worry about it. We live a block away from this park. The boys won't even have to cross a busy road. At that moment, Charles took her hand, showed us his tongue, and the girl repeated after him. The sight was very cute. A genuine smile stretched across my face. The guys headed towards the exit of the park. I hesitated a bit as I didn't know what to do with Adriana, whether to give her a hand or not. I mean, she had just fallen. Maybe she really needed my help. There were already a few sparks running between us, though, so the gesture could be interpreted differently. And I wouldn't want that, because the woman I was looking for was fictitious. She had a role to play. I wasn't interested in anything else. Adriana. The first one headed toward the exit, and I, not knowing what to do, put my hands behind my back. I probably looked like a prisoner, but I didn't care. The important thing was not to ruin something that wasn't even there yet. I walked the woman to my car, opened the door for her like a true gentleman. I got behind the wheel, and we drove off. At that moment, I had no idea where we were going. I had to pick a mid-range establishment, so to speak, so she wouldn't think I was courting her. On the way to another neighborhood, I saw a small restaurant and stopped outside of it. The hostess took us to a table on the veranda. The place was delightful, and so was the view. It was already sunset, and the sky was going from bright blue to deep purple, and in the middle was a streak of red. Adriana looked ravishing. For her age, I was sure she'd order some standard Kaiser. We'll talk. However, the woman surprised me. She ordered lamb kebab and young potatoes. I don't know what was on my face, but when she looked up at me, she said, "You probably know what it's like to spend all day with kids and feet." "I'm lying around and hungry as a dog," said the woman and burst into loud laughter. Unfortunately, I can't imagine what you are experiencing. I don't know how you perceive my facial expression, but I was just surprised that a woman with such a beautiful figure eats potatoes with mutton. Oh, I was shy. So don't be shy. Order whatever you want, I said with a smile. No, let's stop here, or I'll change now, and then I'll want to sleep. I won't care what you talk to me about. I will demand that you take me home. What do you say? Tell me about your children. I understand Charles is your nephew. And Betty. Who's Betty? Daughter? You could say that, but more specifically, if you don't mind. A daughter. A daughter who decided to have a baby as an adult. You are tactfully silent, but I can see that you want to ask me what. How old am I? You don't have to deny it. I can see it in your eyes. Of course, it's indecent for a woman to ask such a question. But I'm not the hidden type. I'm 40 years old and you're 43. Wow. How did you know that? It didn't even take you long to figure it out. I've known you for as long as I've known you. I've been intuitive since I was a child. My father trusted me to pick lottery tickets when I was very young. And guess what? We hit the jackpot. So keep in mind, I can be very useful to you. Adriana had a wide smile on her face, which mesmerized my gaze. Shall we switch to you? I suggested, for I was tired of this officiousness. Let's do it. I began to ask Adriana about her life. I needed to find the perfect woman for the role of a bride, albeit a fictitious one. My mother was a smart, wise woman. She was determined to every little detail. So everything had to be perfect, impossible to tamper with. It turned out that Adriana owned one of the drugstore chains in our town. That was a good thing. The woman had everything she needed, which meant she had no claim on my money. Adriana would have wanted to step away from her business a long time ago and turn the chain of pharmacies over to someone else, but she couldn't trust anyone. The woman said she would run the outlets as long as she could. Then she would simply sell the business. Adriana was a very pleasant person to talk to. To be honest, I didn't want to ruin the evening with my proposal. Adriana was worth more than that. And I was almost certain that my proposal would offend the woman. But it was worth a try, as they say. Adriana, I have a confession to make. I only ask one thing. You listen to me all the way through before you jump to conclusions. Sounds interesting. Well, let's give it a try. I'm listening. I took in a full chest of air. My heart began to pound harder, echoing in my ears. It was no longer acceptable to back up. Adriana, I didn't crash into you by accident, but I didn't mean for it to turn out this way. When I saw you on the lawn, I freaked out and cursed myself with all the right words in the world. I meant to hit you gently with my shoulder, but I didn't realize the force. So I'm prepared to apologize to you for the rest of my life. I'm so ashamed. Shut up, please, I said between words as I saw Adriana open her mouth to say something. I'll go on. Why did I do it? That's the question you're asking. I wanted to meet you, but I didn't see you. Is there a wedding ring on your finger? I thought I'd check it that way. Again, I'm sorry, please. After that, I got to the point. I told the woman about how my mother cares for me despite my advanced age. Of course, I was afraid to seem like a mama's boy in her eyes. However, I could not pass this part of the story about myself. Then I smoothly came to the fact that my mother's cherished dream is that I have a family. Adriana, please, there's not much left. You see, her obsession had become so unbearable that I was almost desperate, so I decided on one strange act. Introduce my mother to a fictitious bride. The woman interrupted me. I was blown away by her insight. No, you had to. I was trying to make it sound veiled. Did I just blurt it out to her? I'm not gonna ask you how you figured it out, but yes, you're right. I thought it was a fake relationship. Please note, not a marriage, but a relationship. It's the best way out of this situation. Well, you know, my mother's not gonna be fooled. She can detect deception. I didn't want some girl who'd do anything for money. I wanted an older woman. You mean old? No? Adriana, no. You can't find a smart woman these days. That's why I looked and looked, and I chose you. Jesus, you've been following me around in a frightened tone of voice, she said. Not just today. I've been watching you for half an hour. Anyway, I've decided you'd be perfect for the role. I'm willing to offer you anything. Please help me. Sounds very strange, to be honest, but I've always been very adventurous. So I guess I'll take it. But I have one condition. I agree to all say that I have not fallen in love with me, that you have not fallen in love with me. I speak Russian, yes. I ended up laughing. It's been a long time since anyone made me laugh like that. I mean, come on. Was she really so sure of herself that she would assume I was falling in love with her? She's an attractive woman, no doubt. But you don't fall in love with someone like her when you're older. They choose them for a home that's cozy and clean and smells of borscht and hockey sticks. I promise, Adriana, that I do not fall in love with you, I said with a slight smile. After that, we were clear on the goals we had to reach. It took us at least an hour and a half to come up with a plan of action. During this time, we drank 2 cups of coffee, and it got dark outside. Not a single star was visible in the sky. It was covered with clouds and a light breeze came up. But it was cold, so I took off my jacket and threw it over Adriana's shoulders. I'm a gentleman. What a nobody. There was no time to delay. So we scheduled the meeting with my mother for tomorrow. Despite the fact that Adriana was an elegant woman, I asked her to observe some dress code. No cleavage, no skirts above the knees, no loose hair. My mother considered all women who didn't adhere to these criteria very frivolous. And what man would want his fiancée to be considered as such, even if it was fictitious? After the discussion, we went home. I drove Adriana home. She actually lived in the heart of the city in a swanky new housing complex. I even managed to get a good look at her windows because Charles was standing in one of them, and 4-year-old Betty's head was sticking out of the other. They were waiting for a woman not 1 o'clock. At this point, I even felt ashamed. It was because of me. They'd spent so much time alone. I hoped they weren't hungry. If they'd come to dinner with us then, I probably wouldn't have told Adriana everything. And the kids don't need to hear that. Adriana left, and I headed home. That night must have been endless. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't get the thought out of my head that our plan was going to fail. And then I remembered the woman's words when she asked me not to fall in love with her. A smile spread across my face. It felt so warm. But I didn't understand why this was happening, and shook my head sharply, as if to empty it. I must have fallen asleep in the morning. So when the alarm clock rang, I didn't even realize where I was. Like a robot, I got up, washed my face, and went to work. I stopped at a coffee shop on the way and got a double espresso. I needed a dose of pep. I took 3 sips. I was going to repeat the purchase, but I thought the effect would come a little later. And I was right. For the first hour at work, I just sat there staring at the wall. How could I write program code if I forgot even my name from excitement? Not to mention the name of my so-called fiancé. When the vigor began to appear in me, I immediately got to work. The cat was pissing himself. My fingers couldn't keep up with my thoughts. I was sure that at the end of the working day I would discover mistakes. But I was wrong. The program worked the first time. It helped to cheer me up even more. I urgently needed to come to my senses because the meeting with my mother was getting closer. Right after the end of the workday, I went home, showered, shaved, and styled my hair. Everything has to be a high level. Otherwise, my mother wouldn't believe the scam. After I realized I looked amazing, I went to pick up Adriana. As I drove up, I noticed she was already waiting for me at the entrance. She looked amazing. She was wearing a classic black background dress that developed easily in the wind, a 3/4 arm on her feet, classic boat shoes, and in her hands a wisp of delicate purple that matched her belt perfectly. This woman certainly had taste. As Adriana got into the car, I could smell the scent of her perfume. It was different from the one she had been wearing yesterday. The day before, she smelled of the sea and freshness. Today, it was a pleasant floral scent with a slight sweetness. "Hi." I held out my hand, hoping she would put her graceful hand in it. "You look stunning." "Hello, David. Really, all your wishes are taken care of?" she asked. A slight smile appeared on her face. I was staring so hard that I didn't even realize we were already holding hands. "You're more than ready. Let's go." Adriana bowed and waved as if the coachman was sitting in front of us. I didn't hesitate. I started the car, pressed the gas pedal, and drove toward my mother's house. Adriana and I had a pleasant conversation on the way. She was talking about how Charles and Betty had greeted her warmly yesterday. The boys had missed their aunt and Mom so much that they had decided to make her dinner. True, it was very different. They served her a salad of red fish apples, crab sticks, and mayonnaise. Adriana recounted that she tried her best to pretend that it was the most exquisite dish she had ever tasted in her life. She prayed to God that the kids would get away from her as soon as possible so she could stop eating that salad. She told it so emotionally that I couldn't keep from laughing. Tears came to my eyes, which made me unable to see the road well. The woman made me laugh so hard that I had to park in the first place I could find. When we pulled up to my mother's house, my heart sank. I knew it was all fictitious, but I was worried as if Adriana was really my fiancée. The woman gently took my hand and told me not to worry. She promised that everything would go off to the best of her ability. I believed her because she was a wise and responsible woman. I think that if she could not fulfill my request, she would have given up on the scam right away. She was not the kind of person who could and liked to lose. More accurately, no one likes to lose. However, some people aren't even upset by it. They take it for granted. We got out of the car, and from that moment on we looked like a couple in love. After all, my mother could stand at the window and watch us. Adriana took me under her arm, and like a gallant cavalier I led her to the entrance, opened the door, and held her close. When we took the elevator to the floor we needed, we found that the door to the apartment was already open, and half of my mother's face was peering out of it. She was too curious. But couldn't you just wait in the apartment? That's where we're going anyway. Hello, my son, my good son. God, I couldn't believe it. That you would come to me today, and not alone at the expense of Metal Mother. Hello, Mom. What did you think I was doing, lying to you? Meet my girlfriend, Adriana. Adriana walked up to her mother and extended her hand. Mom responded to her welcoming gesture, Adriana. I'm so glad my dummy has you. But don't get too excited. It's just that we haven't met at all yet. It's nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Of course, of course. Let's get acquainted. Why are you standing in the hallway? Come into the hall. David, help your bride. Mom, we're going out. Well, it's not hard for a girl to grow up to be a bride. I'm sure you won't drag this out too long. I'm not young at all. And I'd like to babysit grandchildren very much. Adriana's mom turned around and gave me her beautiful smile. It was obvious that the woman was feeling a little awkward. I can't imagine how much the discomfort level would have increased if we were actually dating. Mom was pushing us when we were still in the hallway. What would happen when we made our way into the living room? I had no idea at the time. A sumptuous table was set in the hall. The food was as good as a restaurant's in appearance. Even for a second, I thought that my mom had hired a chef to prepare all these delicious dishes. Of course, that wasn't actually true. My mom had a lifelong love of cooking, and she did it deliciously. Her dishes were not only delicious, but beautiful as well. Over the years, she had honed her skills. We sat down at the table, so there was no doubt in my mother's mind that we were dating. We sat very close to each other, so our hands and feet were touching. At this point, I noticed that my body was responding to this kind of contact. I had to remember the not-so-great moments of my life, so as not to embarrass myself. But I thought Adriana had noticed something, because she looked at me with a sly look and a smile that said, "Yeah, so maybe we'll have a real relationship, I can see that." It made me very uncomfortable. Adriana, well, tell me what you do in life. The woman happily began to tell me about herself. I started to worry that she wouldn't say too much, because she was very enthusiastic. My mom listened with interest. I could see from her face that she was pleased that Adriana had her own chain of pharmacies. She even joked that she now knew where to go with the list of medicines that the doctor would make at the appointment, because the treatment was very expensive. At first, I wanted to ask her why she was going to be treated, but then I bit my tongue, because at her age, all the sores come out. Adriana, how old are you? Mom, isn't it unseemly for you to be so hard on her? But I have to know if your woman can give birth to you or not. I can see she's not a girl anymore. After saying that, I was speechless. That's when my mother became so tactless. How could she even say such a thing? Looking at her face, I realized that she didn't regret the question she asked. The silence was awkward and dragged on. Adriana realized she had to do something. Honey, it's okay. Don't worry. I'm 40 years old, she said with a soft smile. 40, her mother said thoughtfully. That's menopause. It is not a fact that you will be able to get pregnant. Mom, come on, Mom, who's going to take care of you if not me? Maybe she'll leave you when she realizes she can't give birth to you. Mom, God, honey, calm down. You know that in today's world, medicine doesn't stand still. If you can't get pregnant naturally, you can use IVF. It's such a small thing. I marveled at how my fictitious fiancée kept her composure, and the insults flying at her weren't fictitious at all. What normal person wouldn't take offense at something my mother said, no matter who that person was? He would feel insulted. But IVF is nice, but it doesn't feel real. Don't worry, I've got kids. They can help relieve your loneliness if you need it. God, why did she have to say that? This is a real failure, I thought, and I was right. I can see why you're not so worried about getting pregnant. It's just that you already have kids and don't need any more. Mom, please, let's just drop the subject. We did close the subject. I realized that I had a conversation with my mother ahead of me. I was sure she'd be crazy about Adriana. But from the very doorstep, she wasn't satisfied with her age. The interesting thing is that she wouldn't be satisfied with the age of the bride. In any case, she would arise that she was too young and would leave me, and the other one was old and would not bear me children with my mother. There was no golden mean. The rest of the time we talked about distracted topics. Mom was already unwilling to continue the event, and Adriana masterfully built herself a fool who supposedly does not understand anything. That's commendable. After all, one should treat one's mother-in-law with leniency, even if it is a fictitious one. I'm sure that this behavior of my companion, Mom, was even angrier. She liked it when people reacted painfully to her words. Mom thought she was always telling the truth. I thought she was just being rude. I didn't have the energy to continue the evening. So Adriana and I cited fatigue and left Mother's house. At the threshold, my mother reached out to kiss me goodbye and whispered in my ear, "See your lady off and come back to me to talk." Shit, that's what I was most afraid of. But I didn't let on. Adriana took my hand, and we headed for the elevator. We didn't say anything until we were out of the elevator and in the car. And Adriana, please forgive her. I'm just shocked. I had no idea she'd act like this. She's always been like this, but not on the day she met her future daughter-in-law. How could she even say that? You're at a normal age. Do you hear me, Normal? I started yelling as I drove to her house. David, stop it. She's right here. As a mother, I wouldn't be happy with your choices either. You're a young man. You need children. And a woman like me would not be able to give birth to you, or I'd be afraid to. At that age, there can be complications not only for the baby, but for the mother as well. Stop talking nonsense. I was losing my temper. By then I was pulling into Adriana's driveway. I said, "You're a normal age. I don't think it's as bad as my mother says," I blurted out as I pulled the car over. Prove that you don't think so." With a charming smile, said Adriana. I was confused. I didn't understand what she was expecting from me. My body reacted strangely to her words with some unknown impulse. I threw myself on top of her and kissed her. Her lips were very soft, and I felt an electric shock run through my body. It was a long-forgotten feeling. For several years, no woman had stirred in me such desire as she did today. My hands disobeyed my brain and continued to explore her body. It was beautiful, despite her age. Adriana, on the other hand, also had a genuine desire. It was evident in her demeanor. Her breasts rose higher and higher as her breathing became heavier and heavier. I was somewhat surprised at this turn of events, as I thought that my fictitious bride was responsible for the task I had set for her, namely creating the illusion of an ideal couple, nothing more. But I could tell from her that she had wanted me for a long time, and that fact was a pretty big boost to my self-esteem back then. And not just hers. I don't even remember how we ended up in Adriana's apartment, because I don't think we stopped kissing at all. Her lips were so soft, so passionate. I was starting to taste blood after a lot of kissing. Apparently, Adriana hadn't practiced such long kisses in a long time. Opening the front door, we piled into the apartment. After that, it was like we were blown away. I started tearing off her clothes like a beast and completely stopped thinking about the fact that there might be children in the house. Adriana, as if she sensed that I had that question inside of me. "It's okay, they're gone," the woman said with a huff. "They are at their grandmother's house, don't worry." After that, I realized that I was allowed to do everything that I had previously been afraid to even imagine. The rest of the time we did not get out of bed. I'll leave out all the details, but I will only say that in the morning I felt as if I had been run over by a roller. All my muscles and joints ached, as if I had not made love. Yesterday I worked out and left world records in weightlifting. When I woke up, Adriana was still in bed and singing sweetly. At some point I realized I couldn't stop looking at her. At that moment, she seemed to me the most beautiful creature on this planet. I couldn't understand what this woman had done to me. After all, until a few days ago, I was not interested in anything but my work. Adriana was good too. It turns out she had deceived me. I mean, we agreed beforehand that our relationship would be a sham. And today I'm in bed with her after a hot night I'll probably never forget. I wonder how Adriana will feel when she wakes up. Maybe she'll be ashamed. Or maybe she'll want a sequel. Maybe after this, she'll think I'll marry her. What if I do marry her? I don't reject that possibility at all. I had once thought that this woman would only help me to put my mother's guard down. I didn't think she'd make me go crazy. When Adriana opened her eyes, I pretended like a boy to be asleep. My eyes were slightly open, so I saw everything through my lashes. She lost her eyes with her beautiful hands. After that, she looked at me as if I was the love of her life. Maybe that's how it really was. I guess I'd like to believe it. But I was convinced otherwise. Adriana had a recent love anyway, as evidenced by the presence of her little girl, Betty. The woman had a look on my face. A slight, gentle smile appeared on her face. 15 minutes later, she got up and left the room. At this point, I rolled over onto my back, put my hands behind my head, opened my eyes, and stared up at the ceiling. At first, I just didn't know how to act. It was because I couldn't decide what I felt for this beautiful woman. Fragments of last night's flawless and passionate night began to appear in my mind. For a moment, I fell out of reality and only came back when Adriana appeared in front of my face with a tray in her hands. The fragrant smell of coffee wafted through the room. "Good morning, honey," the woman said casually. The way she addressed me made me speechless. I could only reward her with a slight smile. I hoped that at that moment she thought that I didn't answer her only because I had just woken up. "David, calm down. I can see in your eyes that you're really stressed out about last night. Relax. We're adults. We did what we wanted to do. This whole fake marriage thing really got on your nerves. Your mother didn't give us a hard time last night. If you thought I didn't realize it, I'm offended that you think I'm so stupid. Come on, wake up. The coffee will get cold, and it won't be so refreshing. I know something else that'll perk you up in the morning." I didn't expect myself to say it. I'm embarrassed to ask what it is. "Did I ask you to put the breakfast tray on my nightstand?" There was a look of bewilderment on her face. It amused me even more when her hands were free. I grabbed her wrists and pulled her down onto the bed. The woman was pleasantly surprised. She was smiling and laughing. I continued to do what I hadn't had time to finish during the night. Yes, the night was very short indeed. If it were up to me, I wouldn't have gotten out of bed for 3 days. Maybe she's expressing something in another way. There's no way I can explain the irresistible attraction. My lips explored every inch of her body. I wanted her to feel how hot they were. Her body responded to every kiss I gave her. Goosebumps covered her skin. Her legs, her arms trembled slightly. I don't think I'd ever turned on a woman this hard before yesterday. Yes, it was beautiful. That's how our morning went. Of course, by the time we were done making love, the coffee was already icy, figuratively speaking. To be honest, I didn't care for it at all. I began to catch myself thinking that I felt more than comfortable in the company of this beautiful woman. It was obvious that she had absolutely no regrets. I wondered if she had any feelings for me. Why does she always act like nothing happened? Or is that how it's supposed to be? It's not how it's supposed to be. And there were thoughts going through my head all the time. Sometimes I felt like I was mumbling to myself. Maybe I was. Because after a few minutes of silence, Adriana said, "I told you not to fall in love with me." After saying that, I'm seething. Indeed, she did say that. How could she have known it would end up like this? Why are you looking at me like that? David, when you pushed me in the park, I could see from your face that you liked me. I didn't take your request seriously at first. I thought you were just looking for an excuse to meet me. But after just an hour, I realized you weren't lying. You really wanted to give your mother a show like this. I'm sure it didn't look the same in your head. And you may be surprised now, but in my head, it ended up exactly the way it did. Do you really want to talk about the fact that it was written all over my face that in just a few days you and I would be lying in the same bed together? No, not that literally. I could tell by the look on your face that you didn't mind waking up in bed with me. God, why do you look so scared? Do I look like a witch to you? Relax, I'm not a witch, just very perceptive women. At that moment, I was really in shock. My state of mind was not due to being shrewd, but because she was indeed right. After all, it was then that I chose Adriana from the crowd, not because she looked like a hostess, but because she was unrealistically attractive against the rest. Agree that when you choose your bride, even an efficient one, you would still want her to be beautiful and attractive. That's why I made a mistake. Instead of Adriana, I should have stopped my eyes on some gray, unremarkable mouse. And to make Mom happy, this mouse had to be younger than me, but not by much. Although I don't know what would have to happen for my mom to be happy with my choice. She would probably be pleased only in one case, if she herself had chosen a bride for me from all her students, daughters, friends, nurses, from the district polyclinic. Well, to hell with it, whatever happens. After all, I'm not going to marry her. It's not like I'm a teenager who loses his head to the first woman who gives him a mind-blowing night. But also the morning, of course. I got out of bed, not even bothering to cover myself with something she didn't see there. Walking over to Adriana, I slapped her. I couldn't resist. She's got a delicious figure, I'll give her that. What are we going to do? Shy like a boy. I asked the woman who was stirring my emotions. With what? David, just because we slept together. Even if more than once does not mean that between us urgently need to tie the relationship. It's not going to happen against our will. Are you against it? Aya, honey, you are the one who hired me for a fake relationship, not me. With a gentle smile, Adriana said. There was some confusion on my face. I couldn't find the words to say because I didn't know what expressions of feelings would be appropriate in this situation. Why are you looking at me so guiltily? David, we are well into our 20s. Moreover, well into our 35th decade. You realize how much that phrase terrifies me. But nevertheless, we have the right to do whatever we want and sleep with whomever we want. So what's wrong with that? How can you even say that? It was fantastic. You're an excellent lover and, frankly, a good woman. Unexpectedly, I blurted it out to Adriana. It's all out in the open. At that moment, I felt like a boy in front of an experienced adult woman because her face didn't show an ounce of confusion. She knew she was good. I was turned on and annoyed at the same time by her self-confidence. Adriana, I'm going to confess to you, even though I don't know what to confess. I really don't know how I feel about you. I don't think I've ever felt this way in my entire life. I just don't know what it is. But then, so be it. She said with a smile. What life will lead to, that we will be happy. But I'll keep my promise anyway. Your mother will be fooled. Even if we don't have a real relationship, it's already a matter of principle for me. She's so old. And your son didn't think so at all this night, Adriana said. I rolled in laughter. I realized that if it was not love, it was obvious adoration. Perhaps this was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. I never thought that in my old age I would sincerely give flowers and gifts to someone. Adriana and I met 2 or 3 times a week. I didn't want it to be just sex. I knew I wanted something more. I took her out on dates to the best restaurants in town, to last-minute movies, to the theater. I wanted our relationship to be romantic. I knew that sooner or later the candy bouquet period would end, so I wanted it to bring as many positive experiences as possible. Everything was pretty good, but just one thought kept me on my toes. I didn't understand how Adriana felt about me. She was acting dignified, and I would even say reserved. She had never been known for her warmth. In words, in behavior, only when we were in the bedroom. She was ready for me like an affectionate cat. Nightly flings allowed me to let all my emotions out: love, passion, jealousy, anger, and resentment at her coldness. Yes, I did fall in love with her. It took me about 3 weeks to realize it. The realization came the day I woke up in the morning in my apartment, turned on my other side, hoping to hug Adriana. But the other half of the bed was empty. I hoped she had woken up earlier and was now in the kitchen making coffee. I couldn't smell the coffee aroma. However, after going through all the rooms, I realized she wasn't in the apartment. I picked up my phone and found a message on it. "Sorry, urgent business." She left. "Didn't even have a family yet. I'll see you next week." In that moment, somewhere in my chest, it felt like I had a red-hot spear stabbed into my heart. Why was her message so aloof? Why was she so distant from me? Do I not arouse in her an ounce of tender feeling? I was ready to tear the whole place apart. I realized that I wanted her around me all the time. Not a couple days a week, but 24/7. Why has no other woman in my life ever evoked such feelings in me? Why does she accept my advances? She sleeps with me, but she's not affectionate. I had 1,000 questions, but I guess I was never going to get answers. All this time, we no longer went to visit my mother. In fact, I could have brought any girl to her in whom she would have immediately found 1,000 flaws. After that conversation, my mother told me that she no longer wanted us at her place, and she also disapproved of my choice. Even if we get married, my mother will not come to the celebration, so as not to once again be upset about how old my spouse is. Can you imagine this from my mother, who has been hoping for years for some woman to take me in? And here she was with one of the best options, and still she's not happy. Women, they're nothing but trouble. That's true. Until I had Adriana in my life, the only trouble was with my mother. But now there's 2 of them, and I've lost all sense of ground. I just stopped having confidence in the future. I decided that I would no longer call or write Adriana myself. I'll admit it was unrealistic hard. I wanted to ask the neighbors to tie my hands behind my back, but then I decided it wouldn't help. If I wanted to, I would have typed a message to her, but I held on with all my might to get her out of my head for a moment. I started to drink a little too much alcohol just to relax and stop catching the train of thought that was keeping me from resting. 3 days later, a text came to my phone late at night. I was already asleep, but decided to read it as usually no one texted me this late. It was a message from her long me to stand under the door, and I jumped up like scalded. I didn't immediately realize she was standing outside my apartment. I was trying to get my room in order, grabbing a bunch of stuff and throwing it into my closet. I'm sure she heard all of that. I could directly feel her standing outside the door, smiling. 5 minutes later, at least I didn't think it had been more than that, and I flew up to the front doors, barred by my hair sticking out. Opening the door, I saw Adriana. She was marvelously beautiful. In her hands, she held a bottle of semi-sweet red wine. "Did you clean up?" Adriana asked, smiling. "I didn't. I was just sleeping. I didn't immediately realize you were standing outside my apartment. I started making excuses like a kid. Yeah, who was running around your apartment at breakneck speed and banging on the closet doors? Adriana, why would it make you feel better if I told you I did a little scatterbrain? Of course it would make me feel better, but your little bit, that's a lie. A little is no more than 5 minutes. I've been standing here for 20. You have. Oh God, I'm sorry. But why are you standing on the doorstep? Come on in. If you had invited me in sooner, we wouldn't have had to work things out in the common hallway," Adriana said. I sensed she was annoyed. I wanted to beg her forgiveness, but I didn't. I still had some pride left in me. Why should I apologize? If we'd made an appointment beforehand, everything would have been top-notch. She knew that, but now she just showed up unannounced, and I was beginning to wonder why. Maybe you were here with your mistress. Is that it? She was getting jealous. Confidence started to spread. Confidence began to spread throughout her body. Or maybe you were a beer drinker or something. I asked the woman. A smug smile began to appear on my face. I'm jealous. Who do you take me for? What am I? 15 years old? I was just asking. I just wanted to tell you that if you're ever with a girl and I show up uninvited, just don't open the door. Text me. I'll understand. You're entitled to have fun whenever and with whomever you want. She was clearly unhappy that I caught her being jealous, but I understood. Finally, after all this time, she was mine. I wanted to keep playing this game, but I was afraid I'd overdo it. She'd get angry and leave. That's not what I wanted. I demanded her constant presence around me. Walking over to her, I gently brushed a strand of hair out of her face and tucked it behind her ear. My hand slowly descended from her head, Natalia. All the while she looked at me without running. At one point, it seemed to me that what stood in front of me was not a grown woman, but a girl of about 18. She desired me. I could tell. Her shyness repulsed me a little. After all, I had never noticed this quality in the moments of our encounters. I couldn't hold back long and kissed her. God, how long had I waited for this? The few days we hadn't seen each other seemed like an eternity. Her coldness made me think that she didn't care about me. But now I realize I was wrong. She tried to deceive me, but her body says otherwise. I'll leave out what happened next. I'll just say it was wonderful. It was like having our first time again. Adriana, why are you trying to pretend? I asked her as she lay on my chest. I mean, what am I faking? You imagined it. It was clear from her voice that she was agitated and trying hard to hide her emotions. Adriana, our entire relationship, I thought I was indifferent to you, and you were with me only because you were interested in participating in the scam I offered you when you disappeared in the morning and disappeared for a few days. I gave myself my word that I wouldn't write you a single message. Do you have any idea how hard that was for me? I started drinking before bed, but there was a fine line. If I drank a little more, I'd be on your doorstep in half an hour. If I drank less, I couldn't sleep because you fogged my judgment, and I couldn't think of anything but you. And what makes you think I'm pretending? Raising her tone slightly, Adriana asked. Now she no longer looked like a self-sufficient adult who knew the value of her time and feelings. Everything remained as it was. Adriana, why are you deceiving me? You're acting differently now. In my eyes, you're like a young girl who's overcome with jealousy. Just because you think you are, doesn't mean you are. Maybe you're the one who sees me that way. But in the eyes of others, I haven't changed. Adriana, tell me. She lay on my chest again and was silent for about 5 minutes. And then she sucked in a breath. What did she scream? What do you want to hear? That I love you? Yes, I do. Why was I acting like that? Because I didn't want to admit it to myself. I'm 40 years old. What love? Even before we met, I believed in love. My last boyfriend looked quite solid and respectable, but in reality, he turned out to be a common Alfonso. Oh God, yes. If he'd only been an Alfonso, I wouldn't have cared so much. He humiliated me and he stole from me. Do you have any idea how I feel? I'm scared, David. I don't want what we have to turn into something more. You know, people move in and out all the time. Breakups are inevitable. Even though you know you have no future with that person, it still hurts so much when he leaves you. What makes you think that if we get back together, we'll break up? You're setting yourself up for negativity. In this case, of course, nothing good can come of it. You'll always look for faults in me. Like now, you came here for a reason. You're used to me writing you almost every day. And now I've disappeared. You didn't come here mostly because you missed me, but because you were sure I had someone. No, that's not true. Adriana looked at me with eyes of her own. She knew she was lying, and it was very obvious. Okay, you win. Yes, I'm jealous, yes. It was crazy to me when you stopped texting me. I thought you were just trying to get rid of me in my long life. I've been dumped by men a few times without saying anything. That's what annoys me the most. If you've fallen out of love, say so. If you have someone else, say so. And you look for the easiest ways, not thinking that you will bring a lot of pain to the person who loves you more than anything else in the world. Adriana, calm down. You're acting like you just ran into my apartment and found some girl in my bed, sitting on top of me. She came on top of me. I was asleep. Then I woke up and started cleaning up fast. Scattered all over the couch. What's your beef with me? Why are you acting like this? Why can't you just accept a situation where we love each other? Even if you're sure it's not forever, it might be a good idea to live in the present, not the past, not the future. If you're happy here and now with me, why should you care about what will happen in a month or a year? At that moment, I turned my eyes to Adriana and saw that tears were streaming down her cheeks. More than anything, I disliked women who cried. It had to do with the fact that I just didn't know how to act. I hugged her, kissed the top of her head, but I couldn't find the right words. You can't say the right thing when you don't know the reason for the tears. We sat on the bed for about 10 minutes, her crying on my chest and me stroking her hair. After that, I found the strength to tell her how I felt about her. The woman began to calm down. Her sobs became quieter and quieter. The tears were no longer flowing so heavily. Yes, we had such a difficult conversation a month after we met. It's very difficult when two adults with broken hearts meet and realize they have some magical feelings for each other. It's always a scary moment. I understood him like no one else because I felt the same way. I've been through betrayal and lies, but I don't want to think about it now. At that time, what I wanted most of all was to live today, to feel it as much as possible, not caring about what awaits us in a year or two. I realized that Adriana wanted the same thing, but had a lot of fear. Despite this, we started dating her. To be honest, I wanted us to move in together. However, Adriana was against it. I did not put pressure on her as I realized that she needed time to make sure that I would not bring her harm and pain. Despite this, we went on dates every day. It was a magical time for me. I enjoyed every second I spent with her by my side. Adriana really stopped being the willful person she seemed at first. She was turning into a young girl in love. I liked that so much. It seemed to me that this woman was a combination of contradictory qualities. I didn't know what to expect from her in any given situation. Sometimes she would reprimand me like a strict teacher, and sometimes she would make me steal lilacs from the flower beds. Sometimes she wanted to watch some art house movie, and sometimes she wanted me to run barefoot across the lawn. It was really quite entertaining. She'd never acted like that before. In fact, back then, she was still struggling with the warm feeling she had for me. Every date we went on ended in bed. She and I were on the move. We'd go to my apartment or hers. What struck me most was the fact that when we ended up at her apartment, there were never any children there. Adriana said that her nephew was taken by her sister, and she sent her daughter to her mother. I was interested in listening to all her conversations because I knew nothing about her family. For some reason, she kept avoiding the subject. At first, it made me tense, but then I just decided that there were more interesting conversations in the world. But when the topic was about her family, Adriana would always turn the conversation, and Elena would throw kisses at me. At the time, I was fine with that. Sometimes she stayed overnight. And this time, I especially loved, because she always got up before me to make breakfast. And it didn't matter if it was a weekend or a weekday. Most often on such days, I woke up to the ineffable aroma of freshly roasted coffee or her signature airplane. After we ate breakfast, I would get ready for work, tossing in home repairs along the way. Out of habit, I still peered through her windows the same way I did the first time. To be honest, I really wanted to see the kids there. It was a very sweet picture. When I was young, I often dreamed of having a son and a daughter. But things turned out differently. Perhaps my child is out there somewhere, but his mother has chosen to keep quiet about it. If that is the case, I do not judge this woman, because she probably does not know whose child it is. As it happens, the girls I chose were not characterized by any dignity or discretion. I spent the entire workday in torture. At some point, I was ready to take a vacation at my own expense to spend as much time as possible with my beloved. True, I was on my way to my boss to write a request, but halfway there I remembered that Adriana is not unemployed, nor can she carelessly take a vacation because she has the responsibility of her chain of pharmacies on her shoulders. I never thought that my lover would be a woman who has created such a cool business in our city. Most of all, I was surprised by the fact that she had a masterful understanding of all the drugs. She could explain what to take to get rid of any symptom, but she had no environmental or medical background. I think people like that are gifted. I asked her how she was able to gain so much useful knowledge in her business. The answer was simple. I'm just very inquisitive. Gosh, I am also very inquisitive. However, all my knowledge boils down to my profession only. I have never understood how people can simultaneously study in different faculties, have good grades, and yet not pay bribes. Apparently, Adriana was one of them. Most often after work, she and I would meet and go to some restaurant or cafe to have dinner. But what I loved the most were those moments when she invited me to her house and cooked food with her own hands. Would you know how great of a cook she is? I'm sure her dishes could be on par with some famous chefs, and everything seemed to be going well with us. But there was only one thing that bothered me the most. Somehow, since the day I met her, I'd never seen her daughter or her nephew again. It seemed to me as if she were hiding them from me. I tried to speculate as to why this might be so. However, I could not find a single adequate explanation for her behavior. I had done nothing wrong. On the contrary, I was always interested in how the children were doing, what hobbies they had, what successes they had in their studies. Adriana always responded to my questions in a curt manner and changed the subject. And when I returned to talk about the children, she began to get nervous, although she tried to hide it in every possible way. I began to reassure myself that sooner or later we would start spending time together with the children, because I was sure that we are waiting for a long and happy life together. At some point, we decided to spend a weekend together. I suggested to Adriana that we try living together. She was a little scared when she heard my proposal, but I woke up in time and realized I had said the wrong thing. At that point, all I meant was to spend Saturday and Sunday 24/7 together. It was important to me. That's when I thought I could spend as much time as possible with her daughter. And if I was lucky, my nephew would also come to visit his aunt. Adriana agreed, and I chose the place myself. I didn't want it to be one of our apartments. I wanted this weekend to be something special. I chose an incredibly beautiful chalet by the river. The location was really very picturesque. The landscape designer of the vacation base had tried hard. The owners of the site kept and bred their peacock swans. In a separate paddock were horses, which you could pet. Unless, of course, you were afraid they would bite you. For some unknown reason, Adriana said that she would get to her destination on her own. This surprised me a little. However, I did not resist, as she had every right to do as she saw fit. I arrived at the recreation center a little early to ignite the brazier, prepare the meat and shampoo. My companion turned out to be very punctual, was not late for a single minute. The territory was full of vegetation. Therefore, when in the gap I saw the silhouette of Adriana, I stood with bated breath and waited for the children to appear. However, there were none. "Honey, are you so punctual?" "Hello. You know, I expected to see you in slightly different company. Actually, I was expecting to see you in company at all. Where did you put Charles and Betty? Somehow I was sure they'd be with you." "Hello, my good man. To be honest, I thought the children were coming with me too. However, Charles is being picked up by his mom, and Betty threw a tantrum. She said she wanted to go to Grandma's. I didn't try to talk her out of it, because she wouldn't have let us spend the weekend in peace. Of course, I was a little upset. However, now you and I can do whatever we want for 2 days, if you know what I mean." Adriana said the last phrase with a smile that made my heart beat faster. "Of course, I would like to spend these 2 days in bed with you. However, if we have a marathon like this, the first day of work will seem like hard labor. I'm sure that after such fitness, there won't be a single muscle left in the body that wouldn't whimper with pain and the slightest strain. At this point, Adriana burst into laughter. I had been allowing myself more and more of these kinds of jokes lately because they amused my woman. To be honest, I also liked them because I could say what I was thinking, immediately translating it into humor. The first day has passed. Ours was simply delightful. The sun was shining, there was a light breeze. We bathed in the river, sunbathed, ate delicious kebab, fresh vegetables. But the way we spent the night, I think, do not need to explain. In the morning, we woke up not from the fact that the pleasant sun rays hit us in the windows, but from the fact that a crazy downpour was drumming on the roof. Outside the window, thunder and lightning was shining. We hoped that such a mind-blowing spectacle would end soon. However, 2 o'clock later, everything was still as it was. We decided that we should leave back to the city, as the access to the recreation center was not paved with asphalt. The road was unpaved, which meant that with each passing hour the chances that we would not be able to leave increased. After quickly packing everything up, we jumped in my car and drove into town. There it was decided that we would stop at Adriana's house. However, just as we started pulling up to her driveway, her phone rang, and after a short conversation, she said that she needed to leave for work for a few hours. I was upset, but I decided that during her absence, I would have time to make dinner and clean up. I drove my lover to her place of work, and I went to her apartment. When I crossed the threshold of her house, I immediately realized that the children were not here. For a long time, the apartment had been cleaned. Everything sparkled with cleanliness. Such houses, as a rule, children do not live here. The first thing I did was to take a shower. I was there no more than 20 minutes. When I got out, I noticed someone was in the apartment. I carefully made my way across the room to the kitchen. The refrigerator was open behind the door. I couldn't see who was in there. However, I determined from the lower body that it was a woman. I didn't understand. "Uncle, who are you?" roughly inquired the guest. "You know, madam, I have the same question for you. Who are you? What are you doing here?" "Uncle, hello. This is my house. I don't remember bringing a handsome man like you here. But first of all, my name is David. Secondly, as I recall, this is Adriana's house. Of course, you look a little like her, but you're not Anna. Of course, I'm not Adriana. That woman whose name you mentioned, a lot of people call her my mother, but I wouldn't want her to think of herself as such." Gradually, the woman's tone began to loosen with each second. Her speech became more literate and sweet. She no longer seemed like the rude woman who stuck out from behind the refrigerator and tried to figure out who I was. She was a slender brunette with gorgeous clean hair. I wouldn't say her figure was slender. However, she was very appetizing. I caught myself thinking that I found this woman quite attractive. The fact that she called her mother threw me off. As far as I knew, my lover had only one daughter who had recently turned 4. The woman standing in front of me was at least 20. I could not believe that Adriana had kept from me the fact that she had another daughter. "So I didn't realize who you were. And when will my relative come home?" in a stern voice, the stranger asked. "Adriana and I are dating. She's been called into work for a few hours. I think she should be back by 3. Would you mind telling me your name so I'll at least know how to address you?" "Oh yeah, that's not very nice of me. My name is Kathy. It's very nice to meet you, Kathy. I'm sorry to ask you this, but I'm really curious. Are you really Adriana's daughter?" "David, I see my mother has told me absolutely nothing about me." "Yes, that's so like her. For some reason, she always preferred to conceal my existence to her new acquaintances. Have you ever noticed that Adriana is a rather strange woman? You know, at one time I had a wild desire to show her to some psychiatrist or psychotherapist to assess her real adequacy. In part, I was a little relieved. I could finally get to know my favorite woman's family at least a little bit. Kathy seemed like a very pleasant, special person, despite the harsh language in her vocabulary. When I looked closer, I realized she looked a lot like her mother. practically a copy of her. The only thing missing was the loneliness on some parts of her body. Looking at her, I realized that Adriana had no shortage of admirers when she was young. "What are you doing here?" There was a shout. I turned around and saw my woman. Adriana's eyes were huge with surprise. One could guess that she didn't expect to see her daughter at home at all. "Mommy, hello. It's been a long time. How have I missed you?" Kathy clearly lacked acting talent, as her sarcastic grin made it clear that she was lying. "Stop putting on a show in my house. Why did you come here? Finish your business and get the hell out." "Adriana, why would you do that? I didn't realize you had a grown daughter who looks just like you. It's so beautiful. Let's all have tea together. If you want, I'll go and get Betty and everyone will be together." "David, have you met my daughter yet?" Kathy said with surprise. "Shut your mouth. Shut your fucking mouth. How dare you open it? Who the hell are you? Pack up and get out of here," shouted Adriana. Her scream was so exhausting that it made me feel scared for everyone around me. I thanked God that we didn't have the children with us right now. They wouldn't have been able to bear all that was going on right now. I tried to stay calm. However, one question did not want to leave my mind. What is this? Betty, Kathy's daughter. But then why was Adriana talking about it being her daughter? What the hell is going on here? I can't stand the sound of women screaming since I was young. I'm constantly at a loss, not knowing what to say. While Adriana was screaming at Kathy, I started sobbing. I didn't know who to comfort. I tried to insert my own nonsense, but Adriana just kept screaming. I tried to raise my voice so she could hear me, but all my efforts were in vain. This went on for about 10 minutes until Kathy left the apartment. She was in such a hurry that she didn't bother to educate herself. She picked up her sneakers and ran out. Adriana yelled after her, saying she didn't understand why God had given her such a disgusting daughter. For what sins? At first I rushed towards my beloved, but she pushed me away, shouting. Her claims were unfounded. Adriana claimed I let Kathy into the apartment, but that wasn't true. The girl must have had keys because she was inside. While I was showering, Adriana was angry, not ready to dialogue, and my mind was still reeling with thoughts that Betty was not her daughter. To get some answers, I rushed after Kathy. I realized I probably wouldn't find her because it had been so long. She could have gone anywhere. But I decided to try and catch up with her. You running out of the entrance, I stopped. I had to decide which way Kathy ran. I wasn't the lucky type, so I had no hope at all of catching up with her. If you ran to the right, you could get onto a busy road with public transportation. If you go left, you can go into a quiet, cozy park. Just then, it seemed to me that a park or a public garden would be the perfect place to calm Kathy down, as the girl looked very saddened. It was unlikely that in such a state she would head anywhere on public transportation. The choice was made. I ran to the square. In 5 minutes I was there. There were not many people, as the weather was not very good. It was raining from time to time, but in the distance I could see several female silhouettes sitting on benches. I decided that one of them must definitely be Kathy. So as not to startle anyone, I began to walk down the alley at a measured pace. I was right. Near the beginning of the park, Kathy was sitting on a bench, crying quietly. I stopped a few meters away from her because I was trying to find the right words in my head to help her calm down. But the problem was that I didn't realize what words would have that effect. After all, I didn't know what was going on between her and her mother. And if Adriana didn't say anything about what was going on, then Kathy had to tell me everything. If I decided that I was going to be part of this family, then they should have no secrets from me. Kathy, God, how long have I been looking for you? To be honest, I didn't think I could catch up with you. I inhaled. At that moment, Kathy raised her head. I saw her crying. Puffy face. Tush smeared across her cheeks. I could see in her eyes that she was surprised to see me here. David, what are you doing here? Were you looking for me on purpose? Why would you want to do that? Kathy bombarded me with questions. Her facial expression radiated disbelief. I would like our relationship to be normal because I have grown to love her mother. Kathy, please don't be hostile to me. Try to understand me. I love your mother, but I had no idea she had such a grown-up daughter. I thought Betty was her child. Your screaming knocked me out of reality. If I'm going to have any chance of getting on with my life, I need to find out the truth. Please, please help me figure it out. Tell me everything I need to know. Kathy looked up at me, wiped her eyes with her hands, tears welling up and partying. She was confused. Probably didn't know where to start. The truth she told me about her mother hit me like a shoe on the head. I think the girl understood my condition, so she kept silent for a long time to find the right words. David, the only thing I can tell you is that you must get away from your mother. You have no idea what kind of person she is, what she's capable of. You don't know our history. Then I'll tell you. You may not realize it, but I'm only 20 years old. Betty is actually my daughter. A person who knows the elementary rules of math later guessed that when I gave birth to her, I was only 15 years old. I got pregnant, immediately ran to tell my mom about it. I knew it wasn't meant to be, but it just happened. There was nowhere to go. Adriana yelled at me, so the neighbors probably heard it. At first, she forced me to have an abortion. I wouldn't go along with it. We fought for days, but at some point, Adriana said she agreed with my opinion, and I would give birth. I was very happy about this turn of events, as I did not expect my mom to give up so quickly. A week later, we went to the doctor. He told me that I had some malfunctions in my body that needed to be eliminated and prescribed me a medicine. When we got home, my mom said that I would not take these pills. Replace them with herbs. I had nothing against it, as folk medicine and people use for many years. For 2 days, I drank these decoctions. My condition only worsened. One day, I went to visit one of the relatives on my father's line, told her about my well-being and the fact that I was drinking the decoction. When the relative found out what herbs my mother was talking to me about, she started screaming and demanded that I never drink them again in my life. As it turned out, my mother was trying to induce premature labor in me. You see, David and she didn't care about my baby, and she didn't care about me either. From that day on, I never came home again. She tried to look for me, but my aunt carefully helped to hide me. When the day of delivery came, I was taken to the hospital. Here, of course, we made a mistake. This is the only place where we give birth. Naturally, my mom was already there waiting for me. Or rather, she paid the doctors to notify her. I was admitted to the labor and delivery ward. It was a difficult labor. To be honest, I don't remember much. When I woke up, I was told that my baby had died harder, and the pain I had probably never experienced in my life. I didn't know where to go. I decided I would go to my mother. After I was discharged, I went home, but no one was waiting for me there. My mom had changed all the locks on the door. She opened the door a little and told me to get out. I, on the other hand, had been persistent in my day, and so I didn't give up and try to beg off. I could see that mom was nervous. After a while, I heard a child screaming in our apartment. When I tried to ask who was crying, my mom just pushed me away. I flew into the wall, and she shut the door. To say I was stunned is like saying nothing. I had no idea that Adriana would turn out to be such a cruel woman who was willing to kill her granddaughter and hurt her daughter. As it turned out, the horror was yet to come. Kathy continued to narrate. I think my eyes grew wider and wider with each word she spoke. As it turned out, Adriana had bribed the doctors at the maternity hospital to tell them that her daughter Kathy had been admitted. And so they did. While the girl was in the throes of labor and her mother was already in the hospital, discussing with the doctors the scam they had pulled in the end. When Kathy woke up, she was told that the baby had been stillborn. In fact, the staff had forged documents in which the girl supposedly gave up her daughter. Apparently, the guardianship and custody authorities were also involved, as the girl was easily given to her birth grandmother, who eventually became her mother according to the documents. I just could not understand what motivated Adriana to such a disgusting act. At first, it even appeared that she initially wanted to kill this child, and then she took it away from her own daughter. I couldn't believe that I had fallen in love with such a disgusting person. After all, Adriana seemed to me to always be empathetic and merciful. At some point, I felt completely all the pain Kathy was feeling at the moment. I came to the girl, embraced her. She reciprocated. Immediately, she buried her nose in my chest and started sobbing again. I'll repeat it forever. There is nothing more horrible in the world than the tears of a woman. When Kathy calmed down, we talked some more time. I needed to get to know this person as well as possible to understand how to help her. All the while, my phone was ringing off the hook with Adriana's calls. I didn't want to talk to her at the time, so I didn't pick up the phone. It turned out that Kathy had just started a business a year ago. She was helping women become more beautiful. In a small amount of time, she had built up a steady base of clients who signed up a month in advance to see her for manicures, pedicures, and eyelash extensions. Not so long ago, she did all these procedures alone. But now she has a small premises with offices where specialists of the highest qualification work. I began to ask Kathy if she had tried to get her daughter back. The girl told me that for the first year and a half she had been beating on all doors, telling me that she had been deceived, that she had not given up her child. However, no one believed her. The police did not want to deal with the case as they considered it unimportant. The Child Welfare Authority simply closed their doors in her face because her mother had paid them generously. I realized that I could probably help legally get Kathy her daughter Betty back. However, I began to think through all of my options. The fact of the matter is that I believe that Adriana unjustifiably deprived her daughter of her child. In fact, Kathy has done nothing wrong other than getting pregnant at 15. Kathy, please calm down. I believe you have been treated unfairly, to say the least, and I promise I'll help you if things work out. You'll be embracing your own daughter tonight. David, but how are you going to do that? It's impossible. She'll never let me see her in my life. You realize I only saw my daughter when I was peeping at them. I couldn't get any closer, and I watched all the time at a distance of 5-7 meters. If Adriana noticed me, she would immediately grab Betty and run away. One day I tried to go up after her, but she started screaming, calling the police. People around me started looking at me, grabbing their kids. For some reason, everyone thought I was trying to steal the baby. I just wanted to be with my daughter, who was mine, not this grown woman who was called my mother. At that moment, Adriana called again. Like last time, I had no intention of picking up the phone. However, I realized that this was the only opportunity to return the child to his real mothers. When I answered the phone, Adriana bombarded me with hundreds of questions. Mostly she wanted to know why I ran away. What am I doing now? Why didn't I pick up the phone? I tried to explain that everything that was happening had stirred up a storm of emotions in me that I couldn't control. In addition, I decided that she needed to feel guilty. So I mentioned that I was offended by her rash actions and secrecy. Adriana began to tell me that it was all a very complicated story. She was ashamed to admit everything. After that, the woman began to tell her version of events. Her story was that Kathy robbed a store when she was 15 and got pregnant by some criminal mastermind. She knew nothing about her pregnancy at all. She was confronted just a week before she gave birth. The whole time the investigation was going on. When Kathy gave birth, she was sentenced to 5 years. Because of that, the girl had to give up the baby, and Adriana decided to take on the burden. So what you're saying is that Kathy spent those 4 years in prison. Am I understanding this correctly? I asked her mother that question in front of Kathy. Yeah, that's nice. And that's just the way it was. In all those years, she never once thought of her daughter. How could I trust her? This little miracle. I mean, she's gonna go back downhill. Nobody goes back to normal after prison. I saw real rage on Kathy's face. She was ready to explode. I tried with all my might to show her to keep quiet. The belt couldn't be aware of the fact that it was just the two of us now. If the girl made a single sound that Adriana's ears would pick up, my plan would fail. The girl was holding on from the last of her strength. Adriana tried to make peace with me. I told her that I could only meet her if she took Betty with her. She agreed. She said that as soon as she picked up the girl from the babysitter, she would call me right back. Right after that, I started telling Kathy about the plan that had been stuck in my head. I assured her that if everything went smoothly, she would have a daughter sitting in her arms in just a few hours. The girl had nowhere to go, so she agreed with everything I told her. Half an hour later, I received a call from Adriana saying that she had picked up Betty and was now ready to meet me. I set up a meeting at the park. I was now with Kathy. For about 20 minutes, the girl and I discussed where she would be. I gave her the keys to my car, which I had moved closer to the park entrance. When Adriana called, I left Kathy and went to meet my favorite girls. Adriana had a frustrated look on her face. However, the cheerful and upbeat Betty lifted my spirits a little. The girl was happily running towards me. I was surprised by this, as she had only seen me once in her life. However, according to Adriana, the little girl kept asking about me. Of course, I was very flattered by this. As soon as Adriana came closer to me, she immediately started making excuses and telling again her whole story, which of course I did not believe. I tried to make it look like I believed every word she said and asked questions. What surprised me the most was the fact that Betty knew that Adriana was not her real mother. She knew there was some Kathy girl who had given birth to her, abandoned her, then moved far away. I can probably understand why Adriana told her everything about the baby girl, because as she gets older, she will start to realize that Adriana is old enough to be her mother. About 15 minutes later, Adriana's car key fob started beeping. The sound of an alarm was heard from afar. The woman was very frightened that someone might have hit her because she had parked in the wrong place. That was a good thing for me. To be honest, I thought we'd have a longer chat with her. However, Kathy didn't hesitate and went straight to the other entrance where her mother's car was parked to make her yell. I told Adriana that I had no problem staying with Betty for a while the woman went to the car and made sure she was okay. She thanked me and immediately darted off in the direction of the unauthorized parking lot. As soon as Adriana was out of sight, I picked Betty up in my arms and ran the other way. All along the road, I prayed to God that Kathy would make it back to my car in that short time. Surprisingly, the little girl wasn't scared. She took it all as a game, and I tried to joke with her along the way so as not to make people suspicious. Out of the park, Kathy showed up from around the corner, unlocking my car as she walked. I opened the back door, put Betty in it, and jumped behind the wheel myself. Kathy ran over and got in the back seat too and gave me the keys. I started the car and we drove off to wherever the hell we were going. I didn't really know where we were going because now I'm a real criminal, but I'm only a criminal under the law. What was more important to me was the reunion between mother and daughter. All along the way, Kathy hugged Betty and sobbed so bitterly. It was as if what had happened to her 4 years ago had just recently happened to her. 10 minutes later, my phone started ringing off the hook with Adriana's calls. I didn't pick up the phone because I just didn't know what to say to her. I was bitter because I had loved her with all my heart, and she wasn't the person she claimed to be. When Kathy calmed down a little, she began to thank me. The words of her gratitude felt warm in my heart. At that moment, I thought that something could have worked out between us. After a little chatting with the girl, I decided that we would all go into hiding together. I decided that we need to go to my grandmother's house, which was located in 1,500 kilometers from my home. I inherited it, but I had never been there. All along the road, I sincerely hoped that the house was in good condition. It was in a remote village with only about 20 houses, but that didn't scare me. The main thing was that there would be internet, and I would be able to work remotely. Perhaps Adriana will have a conscience, and she will not go to the police and guardianship authorities. If she does, and we are found, Then I will spend all my savings on the best lawyer I can find to help sort out this convoluted story. In the meantime, I will just hope that I have a happy and carefree life ahead of me, and Kathy and her beautiful daughter will be part of my family.